Okay, let's go. Marxism, Leninism versus Charlie Kirk.
Your best definition of Marxism and what you believe about the topic at hand.
Yeah, most definitely. See, when it comes to Marxism, a lot of people have a misunderstanding and think that it's about particular policies. But the reality is that it centers on the role of the state. The belief that the state is an institution that exists to suppress the interests of one class or another, right? Either under capitalism, that it would be the dictatorship of capital, where capitalists suppress the interests of workers to the benefit of their profits. Now, under Marxism, the state serves the purpose of basically serving the interests of workers to the benefit of, to the benefit of the workers to suppress the interests of the capitalists. Because, obviously, the very nature of capitalism is to lower wages, increase prices, and this has an inherent contradiction that basically squeezes the working class and inevitably squeezes the capitalists themselves by leading to
Ben goes by she, her pronouns, trans woman. So, I don't think that's what Marxism means. I think throughout his life, Marx had very varying opinions on the state. I think there were some times when he said that there should be no state at all because he was like an old school romantic who hated bureaucracy and shit like that. And other times where he said that state centralization of means of production was necessary as a transition. No, the center of Marxism is not the state. It's the relations of production between the working class and the bosses. That's like okay. But what do I know, eh?
things like inflation and market crashes. So really, the central theory of Marxism is the belief in a state.
This is probably the central belief of Marxist-Leninism. That wouldn't surprise me.
That works to serve the interests of the working class, to suppress the interests of capitalism, and eventually get to the point where the need of the state itself is irrelevant.
Okay. How much of that do you believe?
Oh, 100%.
Why is Charlie Kirk such a fucking asshole? I feel like he's got such an easy layup here with this person, and he's just going into complete... His face is so weird looking. Oh my god. Why would you not believe that? Why would a person not... Why is it so inconceivable that someone would believe that the state should come in and redistribute means and allocate means of production and labor and capital in a way that benefits workers, not bosses? That's a stupid opinion, but why do you think it's impossible that someone would believe that? Hardcore Val, hi Lorna question, do you have a stream schedule? It's hard to know when you stream since I don't get alerts on YouTube. Just smash the notification bell, my friend. No, I don't have a stream schedule. One day I will have one, but it's not this day.
All of it. So you're just like a full-fledged Marxist.
100%.
So everything Marx wrote?
I mean, not necessarily.
Charlie Kirk is... you can tell he works really hard in these debates because he's got all his talking points and his little binder and shit. And he's got like he seems to have gone through a lot of training to publicly speak and to perform and all that and do these things. And why would you ask such a stupid fucking question? You're a Marxist. Oh, so you believe everything Marx wrote? What the fuck dumb cunt question is that? Like, Jesus Christ. What a fucking... Is that because he's trying to... It's just like one of those guys who just can't think on his feet. He just has, like... Because that's the... What a horrible... Oh, well. I feel like Marx, of all the writers in world history, wrote like an obscene amount. Like, he wrote so much. And he did change his mind on certain things over time, so...
Just so I can understand, just so we can have...
So you like the Founding Fathers? Oh, yeah. So everything all of them ever said is like, probably not, actually. No.
This constructive. Like, just tell me your political philosophy when it comes to Marxism.
Well, I think that really is my philosophy. And we really have to look at, like, not necessarily Marx, who's the theoretician, right? Not even necessarily Engels. We also have to look at the practitioners of Marxism, right? So those people being like, obviously, Lenin, Mao, today...
Oh, you're a big fan of Mao?
Mao's a pretty interesting character.
How many people did he murder?
How many people did he murder?
Uh-oh.
I mean, how many people do you think he murdered?
Okay, guys. Any aspiring tankies in here, or any actually reasonable people who are quite young and one day you're going to get bored of me and you're going to get radicalized to the fucking tanky left. If that does happen to you guys, rule number one, right? If anyone asks you how many people died under Mao's China or Stalin's Russia, don't cackle like a fucking maniac. Okay, never, just don't do that. Okay, that's a bad strategy.
How many people did George
45
Bush
million,
murder?
more or less.
And what are you getting that number from?
How about the Chinese people themselves? Rough calculations of international organizations.
What
Mass
international-
graves.
What do you mean, the Victims of Communism Fund that literally puts out Nazi propaganda on a regular basis?
I'm sorry, wait. The Victims of Communism Fund is a what group?
Puts out Nazi propaganda. They literally have a statue. I mean, you have to
Wait,
be
so-
joking, right? You realize in the USSR, they list Nazi war deaths as victims of
Wait, hold on a
communism.
second. You're pro-Lenin too?
Yeah, I mean, Lenin did a lot of really great things for the USSR. They literally brought what was a feudal peasant society to be a major world superpower.
How
in a
about
matter
the
of a few
Ukrainian
decades.
famine? How was that?
What about the Ukrainian famine?
Like the 6 million people Lenin intentionally killed through forced starvation and famine?
I mean, it's pretty ridiculous.
Is he talking about the Holodomor? Or the famine from the Civil War? The 6 million is the Holodomor number, isn't it? I mean, it varies a lot because Stalin murdered the census takers. That wasn't Lenin. Huh? Where does all this fucking money go, Charlie Kirk? The Holodomor was under Stalin, you fucking airhead. What the fuck? Did 6 million Ukrainians die in the Civil War famine? Wait, because there was a famine in there. Wait. Maybe he's right. An estimated 5 million died. But this was mostly not Ukraine. This affected Crimea a little bit. Whoa, the cannibalism. Golly. We can probably look at those on YouTube. No, this is yeah, Charlie fucked up, I guess. He confused Lenin. He got two famines mixed up. This is the Russian Civil War, where Lenin did requisition food away from like Crimea and parts of Ukraine and other parts of Russia, but like, no, it's not. That's a different part. Different part of the history. Okay.
It's the frame that is intentional, right? Like, let's be real, right? There was a famine, and we can argue about the mismanagement of famines, but capitalists have mismanaged famines all the time.
Hold on a second. What is
Just
a
look at
what
the
is a
Irish
kulak?
potato famine.
What's a kulak?
What do you think a kulak is?
I know what a kulak is. You tell me. You're the
no,
Marxist.
No, I want to know what you think
a kulak is someone that owned a certain piece of land that was not allowed to own that same piece of land because of Lenin and Stalin's government. And if they had owned more than it, what happened to them?
And do you know what? Okay.
They got clapped, didn't they? They got their dome smashed.
No, just answer the question. I'm curious.
What did happen to them?
They went to a gulag. Do you believe those exist?
Yeah, 100% gulags
How many people
exist.
died in the gulag?
Do you know what a gulag
No, just like more or
is?
less. I just want to know.
Do you know what a gulag is?
Yeah, a forced labor camp, or it could be a forced death
You mean
camp.
like the forced labor camps we have in the United States?
Forced death camp? I feel like the talking points have just jumped so hard. Like, I guess Charlie Kirk is kind of just doing this conversation in the way that benefits him. Is not actually like engaging with any further point. Like, he's just going one after the other. But I guess this person's too fucking moronic to like give any. I know there's this thing that tankies do when you bring up like the Holodomor or something like that, and they're always just like, aha, you mean that one organization where the one guy is a Christian Nazi? And like, no, there are quite a lot of people who have pretty unanimous opinions on how bad the Holodomor was and how bad the gulags were and how bad the fucking Russian Civil War famine was. Yeah. I don't know. It's just such a... I feel like it happens so often as well. It's like, you can just say to someone, damn, that like Soviet collectivization and the Holodomor, that was a fucking disaster. And then requisitioning food away from the Kazakhs and the Ukrainians so that even more of them died and surrounding their fucking villages and shooting people who tried to flee for food. That's pretty bad. And they're like, funny of you to quote the Black Book of Communism. Did you know that book where they inflated the number? Like, sorry, what? Huh? Is the Black Book of Communism the only book that ever spoke about the Holodomor? It's so weird. Yeah, they do that a lot. It's very Reddit tier.
States of America, which, by the way, the United States has more people under forced labor than any other country.
Where?
In our federal prison system.
How'd they get
and
to?
our state
Wait, hold on.
prison
How'd they get to
system.
prison?
They committed crimes.
Oh,
And
okay. So it's not forced. They made a choice.
Are you familiar with the?
Wait, no, that's a phenomenal red herring argument you made. I'm just
No,
curious.
it's not
just,
a red herring.
I just want to know how many people died in the gulags.
No,
more or less. I'm just curious.
How many people died in American prisons?
Hold on a second. I'm just curious. Gulags. How many people died? I'm just curious. Give me a number.
Listen, I don't like the American prison system, but comparing it to gulags, yeah. First of all, you commit a crime, like you break a social contract to go into a probably clear, and you get a lawyer and you go to trial and shit. It's still it's a pretty bad system, but it's compared to gulags where it's a fucking show trial. You have no idea who's going in there. You have no idea how long they're staying in there. And then also you kind of I feel like the conditions of gulags were a wee bit worse, you know.
10 million, 15, 20, 25 million, 30 million.
You know, there's this really amazing anecdote. It's really interesting. You see, and
100,000?
No,
like, just, I want a number, like,
listen,
more or less.
Listen, because let's talk about how they get these numbers, right? This is a perfect example. There's this really great story, right, where, you know, you have Winston Churchill talking to Stalin. He's like, hey, how many people died in the famine? And Stalin, obviously not wanting to talk about it, they had bigger things to deal with, you know, like World War II. He puts his hands up. And Winston Churchill walks away and says, oh, yeah, that means 10 million. He must mean 10 million. Now, we can obviously talk about mismanagement of famines, but if we're going to talk about mismanagement of famines, why don't we talk about the people in India that Winston Churchill killed? Why don't we talk about the people
we're not here. I'm happy to do a whole defense of the greatest man of the 20th century, Churchill. I'm not going to actually do that right now. So, was Alexander Solzhenitsyn a liar?
I don't even. Oh God, what a he gave you so much space to talk, and you spoke about what Stalin doing that. Stalin murdered the census takers after the Holodomor because he didn't want anyone to know how many people died. Like, I also don't think the Bengal famine, as bad as that was, I don't think that's comparable either. Because with the Bengal famine, the problem was that they took food. I think. Oh God, it's been a while. They took food away to stockpile for after the war. It led to an insane amount of people dying, like 2 or 3 million. And because there was a war happening and because Churchill was a bit racist, he took quite a while to respond. I think it was something like 9 months or maybe a bit less. And then it took the story reaching international news for Churchill to go around and beg the rest of the world to help him with with sending food over to Bengal. I don't think Stalin really ever had that moment. The Soviets, when they knew what was happening, they surrounded the villages with soldiers with guns and shot people who were trying to flee. And then they tried to hide the evidence afterwards by murdering the census takers. These are a little bit different. And also, during the Bengal famine, I may be wrong, I don't think it coincided with a cultural purge of Indian nationalists or Indian dissenters or Indian intelligentsia, intellectuals and artists and things like that. Whereas in Ukraine, it did. They were murdering cultural figures. They were murdering politicians. And so I don't know. I feel like they're a little bit different. They're both bad, but they're pretty different. The Irish famine if that Benny person was actually like slightly less retarded, she could do a good job to bring up the Great Indian Famine. That's probably a more comparable one because that was under the British Empire, and that was a famine, again, not intentionally caused, but I think more likely intentionally abetted because people thought, I think there were quotes from one of the viceroys who said that it was God's will, like vanquishing the fucking undesirables. I think the Great Indian Famine is probably a better analogy to the Holodomor than either Ireland or Churchill. But isn't the Great Indian... No, the Great Indian Famine is older, isn't it? Hang on. Great Indian Famine was 1876. Oh, it's just called the Great Famine. No, it's the Great Indian Famine. I was right. This was one that you can say that there was definitely a bit more Holodomor adjacent behavior. But you're also talking like 50 years earlier. So, but also, people who are defenders of liberalism and capitalism typically don't defend this. Like, not even close. Maybe some of them do. Oh God. Anyway.
I don't know who that is.
They call it great.
You're kidding me.
Why do you think the Irish famine is different? Because I don't think the Irish famine was intentionally prolonged to wipe out the Irish people. I think some of the measures they took were very punitive and all that, but I don't think it was like consciously abetted by the British authorities. And every bit of evidence I've seen to the contrary to that are like quotes that start mid-sentence and there's either no context given or you find the context of it and it's like completely different. So no, I don't know if it's quite the same. I don't really know if there was any elected officials actually like saying that we should let the Irish famine continue because it's based. Like, I don't know. Whereas that did happen with the Great Indian Famine. Like it was actually put in as a policy and shit. So
You're a Marxist that you do not know who Alexander Solzhenitsyn is. He wrote a book called The Gulag Archipelago, which was a first-person account. He actually was in a gulag.
Come on.
So, and you don't even know who he is.
Jesus Christ. Rule number 2. When someone brings up gulags, don't cackle like a fucking maniac. Okay.
You know that people that worked on it admitted that they just made up a lot of those numbers, right?
He lived in one.
But I thought you didn't know who Solzhenitsyn was. Why are you you didn't know who he was and now you're just saying that he made up the numbers? What the fuck is wrong with you? You see what I mean? People who are like pro-liberal democracy capitalism don't say this shit when people talk about famines. Like, typically speaking.
My friend.
There's a lot of people who lived in the gulags. In fact, there's a really great...
yeah, and so they're liars?
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of
okay,
people that lie about communism
so
on a
let me
daily
get this right.
basis.
Let me get this straight. So the pastor who spent a decade in a forced labor camp with 1 hour of sunshine a day, Joseph Bondarenko, he lied about that?
I mean,
Because he wanted to just spread the gospel? I'm curious just kind of like what your belief is on gulags. So we can just have like a similar...
Okay, I'll tell you. I'll give you a
Yeah.
really great example, right? And you see the CIA actually ran numbers on this. This is really interesting. So somewhere around 10% of the people, right, that like were in the gulags during their peak, which by the way was after a civil war in Russia, right, obviously with the white army that they had to deal with, right, and then the World War II with Nazi Germany, right, were political prisoners. But this is really interesting, right? I believe it was in the Gorbachev years, they tried to do a big reformation and granted a huge amount of amnesty. To like tons and tons of people that were in those gulags. And do you know what happened, Charlie? Do you know what happened after that? This is something that the CIA documents literally
You mean after the
reported on.
liberalization of the USSR
No.
or what?
What happened to the people that were let out of those gulags?
They wrote books like the Gulag Archipelago that
No.
brought down the
Most of
USSR.
Most of them actually ended up right back in those same gulags because, this is to be very, very clear, that's their normal prison system. That is the normal prison system that they had, just to be clear. Because who do you think set up the gulags?
So you're trying to tell me that
No,
the
no.
people that were put in the prisons were not political prisoners?
No.
So what happened to the Mensheviks?
Most of the people.
What the forced imprisonment of the Mensheviks? So
Most
tell me
of the people.
how did Trotsky die?
I feel like Charlie Kirk could have had a better answer to that. Oh well.
What do you mean, an
Who
assassination?
who killed Trotsky?
Look,
Rule number 3. When someone asks you how Trotsky died, even if you want to impress your own tanky friends, I suppose. Yeah, tankies don't really like Trotsky, but yeah. Don't cackle.
look.
No, tell me who killed Trotsky?
Are we gonna talk about economic theories?
We
or are
will.
gonna
No,
talk
but no,
about
I'm just
man
curious,
specific
just
event?
like, because I'm just trying to understand. You say you're a Leninist.
I mean, who killed
So-
Salvador Allende?
So 66 million people died in the gulags, rough estimation. Does that not concern you?
I mean, most of those numbers are inflated. Like, you gotta really understand this. Like, the reality is that was their normal prison system. If you look at the mortality rate in the gulags compared to the mortality rate...
Is that true? Do they not have a prison system distinct from just the gulags? Because I thought the gulags were like camps, like forced labor camps. Or are they just saying like, yeah, it was their normal prison system? What, their normal prison system was like a forced labor camp? Does that make it better? I don't know what. Your normal prison system was like concentration camps? That's it's weird, a bit wacky. I don't know if I believe that. Let me say Soviet prison system. Gulag was a term that people used to denote the prisons and internment camps in the Soviet Union. Okay.
in American prisons at the same exact
So
time.
let me ask you this. So
like-
how many people died in the Holocaust, would you say?
Well, that's easy.
I don't know. I'm not a Holocaust expert.
What? No. Oh shit. What the fuck? That's it. Is it because she doesn't know how many people, or is it just Jews? Is that why she got confused? Did she have brain fog? What the fuck? Even then, I think for the like, including non-Jews, it was what, like 11 million? However many, 1 or 2 million Roma. Fuck. Yeah, 11 or 12 million. Yeah. Yeah, that's easy. You just multiply the Jew number by 2. That's how. Yeah. Fuck me. Disabled people. Yeah. Action T4. Mentally ill people. What else was it? Gays. Gypsies. Who else? What were the other groups that made up the other 6 million? Here we go. So yeah, Eastern Europeans, Soviet civilians, Serbs, Jehovah's Witnesses. God damn. Asocials, homosexuals. Okay.
How about like 8 million? Would you say that's fair?
So I know at a minimum there's 6 million Jews that
Okay,
died.
so why are
thank
those
God.
numbers accurate, yet the Gulag ones aren't?
Well, it's very interesting that you bring that up, because the truth of the matter is, if you look at the people, right, if you look at the like denazification of Western Europe, what you end up having is you have a lot of people, like, for example, right, like Nazi government officials that get put in charge of West Germany, right? Then you have Nazi officials that get put in charge of institutions like NATO, and then you have a lot of these Nazis that quite literally set up institutions, right?
Oh
like
my God! Like, yeah, yes, they took some scientists, Nazi scientists, and some of them were in NATO. Like, did that make NATO a fucking JQ organization? Is that what happened? Apparently, I don't know. I wish these tankies, if it's so bad to employ former Nazi scientists, why is this not bad? Oh my God. Why? Yeah, because Operation Paperclip was the Western one. The Russians did the same thing with more scientists, with 6,000 people. Oh my God, tell you what, the Soviet guy who made this word unpronounceable is a fucking genius. Because Operation Paperclip, you're like, yeah, well, what about Operation also of and then you lose the debate. Yeah, can we just change the name of this to Operation Paperclipski? Bro, you think the West did a good job in World War II? What about Operation Paperclip? I mean, the Soviets did the same thing. They did Operation also Klablovliv. Oh no. You know what? Let's do it, finally, for the first time.
Operation
video.
Oso-Aviakim was a Soviet operation.
Oso-Aviakim. I'm never going to remember that. Oso-Aviakim. They'll think, if I say this, if I ever get in an argument with a tankie and they're going to talk about Operation Paperclip and I say, you know, the Soviets employed more Nazi scientists than were employed in Operation Paperclip. Yeah, they did Operation Oso-Aviakim. They'll think I just made it up. I guess they think that about every claim about the Soviet Union that's bad, but Operation Oso-Aviakim. Who? That's not even to mention how many former Nazi, like Gestapo people were employed in the Stasi in East Germany. Where is the thing about it? Oh, here's the DW article about it. Yeah. Yeah, in East Germany, they actually employed a lot of Nazi officers to work as spies. Also Him. Also him. Okay, nice.
That
Like
put
who?
out information.
What
that
are you
put out
talking about?
information.
Like name one person.
Look at the first commander of NATO. Literally, look at the first NATO commanders. They literally brought in people from Nazi Germany. Are we going to pretend that Operation Paperclip is not a thing that the United States did?
Operation.
Ha ha ha! Are we going to pretend that Operation Ozio Gimbin Paperclipski isn't real? Oh shit. Also Him. Do it. Oh god, if Charlie says it, I will actually become a right winger. If Charlie gets this, I'm gonna convert. Okay, I'm gonna join Turning Point.
Paperclip was in conjunction with Operation Mockingbird, which was a CIA propaganda campaign, which I don't quite answer the question of the accuracy of gulags. Anyway, that's a little bit of futile. I'm just trying to understand, though, like, maybe we're just on different planets here, quite honestly, because I've actually met countless, thousands of people that were in these gulags, and their stories and their firsthand perspectives.
Thousands. What? Charlie. The fuck? You're not really you're doing a really big favor there to tankies who think the numbers are inflated when you say you've met thousands of gulag people. Did he visit one of the graves? Did he visit one of the mass graves? Is he going to say how many Holocaust victims he's met as well because he stood in front of the fucking Auschwitz display of all the shoes? I don't know. None of that counts, buddy.
And they did nothing wrong to be put in there, except they had the different political viewpoints, or they were pastors. And
I mean, that is true. If you ever go to Eastern Europe, it's definitely worth visiting one of these like former Soviet museums, because I think most big cities in Eastern Europe, especially like the Baltics or whatever, they've kept their old the old KGB prisons have been turned into museums. So you get to see the names of the people who were killed there and like what their crimes were. You can even go into the old execution chamber and you can still see all the bullets in the walls. And you and next to each bullet, you have like there's like a number, and you can go into the wall and see the number corresponding to a name and what they were taken in for. A lot of it was like poets, like nationalist poets just wrote something about, or like some people who just didn't do their duty properly. That was a crime in the occupied Soviet states. Yeah. The thing that was really unsettling to me was the room that they were kept in when they were waiting to be interrogated. It's like this little brick room with like two benches along the sides and a massive radiator. And what they would do was they would have these huge, incredibly bright fluorescent lights with no window. So, and they were just, those lights were on all the time. And they would sometimes cram like 50 people into this room, and the radiator was always on, as hot as it would go, just to distress the people who were in there. So you're in this room of like 50 people, and they've got the heating up, you've got the fluorescent light shining down on you, and you were sometimes in there waiting to get interrogated for hours, sometimes even a couple of days. The outside the door, there was a carpet, because the guards didn't want you to know when they were coming past to have a look in.
You embrace a political worldview that does that.
Well, let's take this.
And that's not even to mention what they did in Operation Osteoclavicum.
Example. Let's imagine that you're a serial murderer in the USSR, right? Let's imagine, and then you go to the Gulag, right? What's the easiest
I'm not imagining.
opportunity?
I'm talking about pastors. I'm talking about
no.
people that
like,
have.
This is the reality. Because like if you want to
No,
talk
it's
about,
it's not the
like,
reality.
There's
I'm talking
plenty of documentaries. Like look, for example, right? For example, okay.
So I'm just want to make
Radio Free Europe
So-
did this really great interview session where they literally.
Oh my god. I just feel like not enough people know about all this. Like the way that tankies follow these so easily debunkable scripts. Because I guess maybe if you get into these debates like to begin with, you might find tankies like a bit intimidating because they fucking brag, because it's all like very niche history, like Soviet Union and shit like that. But it's also very like they always like they'll sneer at you for reading a Wikipedia article or some shit. But they always just go to these like really, really ridiculous points. Like when I remember when like that one, like, oh, they my country yearns for freedom, because apparently there were these fake Twitter accounts at one point from Cuba that said President Trump, my country yearns for freedom, to during the embargo kind of scandal thing. So but now every time you hear about a country that's suffering under, like, where the people aren't happy with communist rule or whatever, or there's like some whistleblowers or some shit, the response from the tanky people will just be like, oh, my president, my country yearns for freedom. Like, oh, it's, yeah, they just, it is kind of like, I don't really like doing these comparisons, but it actually is so similar to the argumentation used by Holocaust deniers. It's just you find like one hole in the narrative, or like the weakest bit of evidence, or like some scrap of propaganda on the other side, and just like that's all criticism of us. That's what it looks like. Yeah.
Went to people that were in these gulags, and it was so funny because when Radio Free Europe puts out this video about these people who used to live in the gulags, they asked them, oh, what do you think about Stalin? And they basically said, because remember, right? You remember that the USSR was invaded by the Nazis, right?
Yeah.
And you also
yes,
remember
and then
that
they deterred the invasion.
You
but what
also
happened
remember
before
that the USSR
they wiped out.
had
They almost
a
wiped
civil
out
war,
all
right?
of Ukraine.
You also realize
wait,
they
hold
had
on.
a civil war,
The Civil
right?
War was between the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks because they couldn't determine what blend of communism they wanted.
Okay.
After they overthrew the Romanov dynasty, right?
Well, you also have the White Army. Do you know what the White Army is?
I'm very familiar with the White Army.
You know the royalists, the people that were trying to.
Yes, of course. But
okay.
I'm
like,
just.
So
we'll close on
if
this
you're
topic.
The Civil War,
but
are you going to put
I just
people
want to
in
reinforce
jail
for the audience here,
if they start a civil war in your country?
You.
I know the United.
I think that's an interesting point, because the Mensheviks were like basically next door to Social Democrats. It's funny when people talk about the Communist Party in Germany and how they hated Social Democrats, and people are like, oh, it's okay because Social Democrats killed Rosa Luxemburg, and that's why it's okay to just like always. And that was why it was okay for the left to just be completely split, even if it made it easier for Nazis to come to power in the 20s. But I feel like Social Democrats, yeah, they were some of the first people to go in the Bolshevik Revolution. So it does kind of show you like how you really do have to be towing the party line to a T before you get fucking, if you want to be safe. And even then, you're not really. I think there's a really good stat from the German Communist Party, because when the Nazis took over, the German communists, a lot of them fled over to Soviet Union. But because Stalin was so paranoid, and because of the collectivization policies that caused such a mess over there, a lot of those communists from the KPD were not safe in Stalin's Russia either. So one person from the German Communist Party fled over to Russia and was murdered because he was friends with Rosa Luxemburg. And Rosa Luxemburg at one point wrote an article criticizing Lenin. And their stat is, I think, that more members of the Politburo of the German Communist Party were murdered in Stalin's purges than were killed by the Gestapo in Germany. That's a true story. Because some communists in Germany stayed, some fled, but more of them died in Stalin's purges than were killed by the Gestapo. You were less safe under Stalin as a communist in the 30s than you were under Nazi Germany. That's a true story.
The United States doesn't like to jail insurrectionists.
Remarkably,
that's what they did in the U.S.
Just made an argument that was pro-Gulag, and
yeah, they had a prison system. That's correct.
It kind of does explain some of your other views, because we're just living on different planets, like Team Reality, Team Narnia.
So how is our prison system better?
Wait, hold on a second. For example, you got a lawyer We have an independent judiciary. You have a jury of your peers. You know what a show trial is?
We have
What is
an
a show trial?
independent judiciary.
Hold on, what's a show trial?
What's a show trial?
Yeah.
I don't know. Ask Steve.
Rule number 4. When you have to compare a show trial to the right to a lawyer and a jury of your peers, an independent judiciary, don't cackle like a fucking maniac.
Even Donziger.
Who was General Tukhachevsky that Stalin
As
took up?
Steven Donziger. You think the United States doesn't do show trials? Look at Guantanamo. What are those
Hold on a
people
second.
doing
What
in
you're trying to
Bro, how many people are in fucking Guantanamo compared to the Gulag system? Jesus Christ. All right.
do is indict the entire Western legal tradition and conflate it with the Lenin.
Yeah, like, oh God, Charlie, if you were a better debater and you could think on your feet, yeah, imagine Guantanamo, but for an entire country. Yeah, that would be really fucking bad, actually. Yeah. Imagine if the entire criminal justice system of a country was operating the same way as Guantanamo. That's the Soviet Union. Yeah, well done. Well done, you fucking moron. All right.
Stalinist, we're going to kill half the population we don't like. Look,
No,
you could
what
have...
you're trying to do is you're trying to take a country that had to deal with a civil war, that had to deal with an invasion, and compare that to the United States today.
I'll close with this. You are defending genocide, which is quite honestly a remarkable thing to see in
hold
real
on.
time.
Stop right here,
You are
because,
defending
look,
genocide of Joseph Stalin
let's be
and Vladimir
very, very
Lenin,
clear.
the intentional destruction and
See,
killing of 65
this
million
is
people.
what I'm talking about.
And no,
Like,
there's no middle ground in genocide. That's your opinion.
Moving on. Has there ever been a successful example?
Oh no. I feel like, I noticed that Wick hosted a debate on the Holodomor, didn't they? I keep saying I'm going to look into more of it. I'm pretty sure the historical consensus on the Holodomor is that it wasn't a genocide. I think the contention comes over how you define intent. Some people say the intent thing has to be like, it was intentionally caused, which it wasn't. No, I don't think anyone says that. Even conservatives don't say that. But then also whether intention include that it was intentionally aided and abetted, which I think it seems to be that it was. I don't really know the argument for that. I don't know why you wouldn't include like allowing it to continue into intent for genocide convention. I don't know why you wouldn't include that. Because I think that's what you would say with the Russification implies heavy intent, but that's different. That's not the Holodomor though. The Russification was, so if you're talking cultural genocide, then yeah, sure. Like, but that's a much broader definition. Yeah, if you're talking cultural genocide, then even if there was no famine, it would have been a genocide. Yeah. But I don't really know what the argument is for that special intent thing not including things like Holodomor or Great Indian Famine. I think it probably should. That's where I am now. But, yeah. Yeah, the intention was to collectivize the farming, was to collectivize the agricultural industry and to disempower Ukrainian farmers. But I don't think the intention was to have 6 million or 7 million of them die. I don't think there's ever been any evidence of that. But it's also difficult because Russians, they don't like to release their archives. So there's quite a lot going on probably in there that we don't know about yet. That's why all the estimates are like, oh, it could have been 1 million, could have been 8 million. Estimates range from 1 million to 3 billion. It's like, okay, wow. I'm pretty sure the Holodomor estimates are actually like that. They're really broad. 3.5 to 5 million. I thought the estimates were broader than that. United Nations declared 7 to 10 million. Current scholars. This is the thing that's kind of frustrating, though, is I think the reason that a lot of people call the Holodomor genocide now, it seems to be like a political thing rather than like an actual analysis of the event. Because how can the United Nations and all these countries say 7 to 10 million died, but scholarship is 3.5 to 5 million? I don't know why the UN wouldn't just go by scholarship. And it's not like, maybe you want. Is that is that a big deal, Lorna? Maybe, I don't know. I don't even know if I like it that people for political reasons are changing the way that we understand historical events, or because I feel like you're kind of buying into that whole. You're giving ammunition to that whole statement of like history is written by the victors. I think history should be written by historians. Right? I think that's what we tend to go for, right? It's just outdated. Oh, okay. But I still think, no, wait. I think with, the European parliaments and these other countries who say that it was a genocide, I don't think historians agree with them on this, do they? This is why I think there's a dispute, isn't there? It's like with the Canada thing and how fucking Justin Trudeau and those Truth and Reconciliation guys said that what was happening to the Indigenous Canadians right now was a genocide, like happening right now. But obviously, no one else in the world believes that. Like, I don't know. But I could be sorry. I also said I haven't looked that far into this, so listen, don't believe anything I say, okay? Unless you want to, and just be careful out there. Yeah. I think there's legitimate contention with actual historians if it's a genocide or not. I'm pretty sure most of them say it's not, though. Am I wrong about that? I think Timothy Snyder says it was. But I don't think he's like I think he kind of represents a minority of historians on the Holodomor. As far as but the way Snyder the way Snyder talks about genocide is he seems to kind of like, he does seem to interpret the definition in his own little way. Like, the same thing about what he said with Ukraine and the war. Yeah. Genocide. See, when people say things like this, though, genocide, no, intentional, probably yes. Well, no, the whole point of the whole dispute about whether or not it was a genocide is whether or not it was intentional. That's the heart of the issue, is whether or not it was intentional. You can't say genocide, no, intentional, yes, because if it was intentional, it would be a genocide. Yeah. Kazakhstan was also affected. Yeah, but then that still doesn't take away from the genocide argument, because they would say that Kazakhstan and Ukraine were uniquely affected because after the famine started, food was requisitioned away from Ukraine and Kazakhstan into Russia. So the fact that it affected Russia, Kazakhstan, and Ukraine, because Russians were affected as well. It was like, there's a gap between Ukraine and Kazakhstan, right? And Russia is in that gap, yeah. But I don't think that necessarily means that they were treated the same, because I don't think, as far as I know, I don't think Russian villages were surrounded by Red Army troops shooting people for trying to flee. That did happen in Ukraine. So that's like, yeah.
Of Marxist theory and action where the workers are truly empowered.
Damn.
Yeah, 100%, most definitely. Like, so first and foremost, we have obviously the brave Vietnam soldiers that defended themselves.
The Viet Cong?
Defended themselves against the invading American army, which was basically there to punish them for daring to free themselves from French colonial rule.
Wait, so hold on. How did that work out?
What do you mean, how did that work out?
So, I mean, no, seriously. The Ho Chi Minh City under communist rule, better then or better now?
What do you mean, better then or better now?
Was Ho Chi Minh a better place under Viet Cong rule or better now under more kind of Western?
Who do you think is in charge of Vietnam right now?
I mean, it's a generally much freer country than it was 50, 60 years ago.
Oh, is this when we say that the government is communist still, right? Oh, no.
Weird. When did the Communist Party lose power in Vietnam?
Well, hold on. They've industrialized their country. They've opened themselves up to international trade. They actually have fair and free elections. Like, I'm not going to say Vietnam's a perfect country, but post-Viet Cong rule, their standard of living has increased.
So you think
infant mortality has gone down?
You think maybe perhaps Agent Orange had something to do with some of the struggles he had? Do you think that maybe the sanctions from the United States of America cutting off supplies to food maybe had something to do with it?
Okay, got it. So America's always the villain. So besides the Viet...
I don't think Vietnam has... Wait. Vietnam is a one-party state, right? It doesn't have fair... Are those fair and free elections? I would probably say no. Interesting. But also, like, this idea that Vietnam is still, like, communist in any meaningful sense. Like, look, I love these polls as well, like, how favorable their views are of the United States. Jesus Christ. Damn. But, I mean... It's like the Doi Moi reforms were really popular. I think like it's Vietnam is like a hotspot in that region for foreign business now, even though they still try to say this because oh god, I had this argument with fucking Noah Samson of all people. It didn't last very long, but about how whether or not owning land in Vietnam was capitalistic because the land is technically owned by the government. But if you look at how the land is owned, it is technically owned by the government, but it's only owned by the government in the sense that the government can take the land away from you if you don't meet certain standards, like certain standards set by the government. But that's the case in like the UK as well. It's the case in a lot of parts of the world. Not even to mention like compulsory purchase and shit like that as well. And it's like if the land is owned by the government in a communistic way, like is it really? Like there are billionaires in Vietnam. It seems to be that foreign business gets on pretty well in Vietnam. People are okay to buy land and shit in Vietnam, even if it's technically owned by the government could take it away from them at any point. But it seems to be the case that you don't have to engage in like rampant capitalism for the government to take your land away. It seems to be the threshold is quite high. So it's just one of those things where it's one of those things where it's capitalism with like a little hammer and sickle stickered on top of it. It's like one article on it. Vietnam's land rights use can be complicated for the first-time business investors. Collectively owned. Cannot have full and legal ownership of the land. Different types of land right use we discuss. Under current law, foreigners can retain an LURC for 50 years, while locals can have one indefinitely. The government can choose to grant a one-time extension of another 50 years or take the land back if the party has failed to use the land under the terms and conditions. While this system may seem inconvenient,
the Vietnamese didn't view us as invaders as much like allies of the opposition in the Civil War, as well, China invading them like a few years later after us.
I don't know enough about the Vietnam War, so sure, bro. I believe you. Thank you for the $10, Hardcore Val. I really appreciate that. I don't know enough about the Vietnam War to comment, but thanks. While this system may seem inconvenient, other countries such as the UK also employ such a system without significantly constraining investors. And this is the point, right? Like,
from what I read online, the Vietnamese didn't view us as invaders as much like allies of the opposition in the Civil War, as well, China invading them like a few years later after us.
Yeah, I suppose when you say it twice, I'm more inclined to agree with you, actually. Whoa, propaganda. Yeah, I think this is the idea that is it constraining investors any more than a capitalist economy would? And it doesn't seem to be. It seems to be Vietnam is actually really popular for foreign investment. So, if you're going to say that, sure. I mean, if tankies want to accidentally rep capitalism, that's fine. That's funny as fuck. All right.
Kong, which is a new one, I'll be honest. Where else has communism worked?
China, look at China.
Okay, what about China works with...
Aside from the fact that China's the strongest economy in the world right now, there's obviously the fact
Are you fucking joking? Oh my God. Okay.
that average wages in China have tripled over the past
Okay,
decade.
so before we go any further, do you really want to defend the Chinese Communist Party against me?
Sure.
Okay, got it. So,
I love the anime fucking posture. Do you really want to step into the ring with me? Well done, Charlie. And
Uyghur Muslims, how do you feel about them?
uh-oh.
So you're pro-concentration camp?
Don't cackle.
No, not pro-concentration.
Okay, so
cackle.
where are the Uyghur Muslims right now?
Do you know what the East Turkmenistan
No,
movement
no,
is?
don't change the topic.
I'm not. This is the same topic.
Uyghur Muslims.
You don't know that the East Turkmenistan movement was labeled by the United States of America as a terrorist organization.
Oh, got it. Okay, so pro-concentration
inside
camp.
of China.
Got it. What about
That's
the
not
one-child
pro-concent-
policy for
Hold up.
40 years?
No. We need to stop right here because first and foremost, you pushed earlier the double genocide theory, which,
No,
by the way,
you-
Holocaust scholars
Holocaust denial. Oh no.
have
You
very
are pro-genocide, but
explicitly-
anyway.
No. Stop right here.
Saying no doesn't make it right.
The double genocide theory is literally Nazi propaganda. The whole idea was to say that the obvious, mismanagement of a famine, they're trying to equate that to the invasion and the mass murder committed by the Nazis. They're literally Nazis that intentionally push that theory. Why do you think that Israel, to this very day, actually has tensions with specific people in Ukraine who are pushing that double genocide theory? Because the truth is, a famine and the mismanagement of resources
I'm talking about, in addition,
is not
mass
the
graves.
same.
It's first of all, also like using your own like Reddit jargon on people who don't give a fuck about double genocide. Again, double genocide theory. coming from the kind of people who will call everything Americans do a genocide. They call the Iraq War a genocide. They'll call fucking the sanctions on the Taliban a genocide. Like, I've seen people do that. It's just, yeah. But okay.
Gulags and all that.
As an
But let's talk about the
intentional
CCP.
genocide.
So let's talk about the CCP. So you're cool with the one-child policy?
It doesn't matter what I'm cool with. The reality is.
No. That's
that-
I think it's called the East Turkestan movement, not the East Turkmenistan movement, apparently. Okay. So we're cool with incarcerating people in camps under threats of terrorism. By the way, Guantanamo Bay, which has 40 people in it, is equivalent to the fucking gulag system. Well done.
That was a policy of the CCP for years, where they would murder another child if you had more than one kid.
Look, what we need to understand is that China is a democracy, and they are going to make laws
Well, no, hold on a second.
based
Wait.
off of their
How are they a
individual material
How are they a
conditions.
democracy
Are
exactly?
you kidding me? Aside from the fact that the central government has a 95% approval rating, which, by the way, before you're like, oh, but
Have
they're
you been
forced
to China?
No.
No.
No, of course.
Oh,
I
so
haven't
you
been
must
to
be a
China.
subject matter expert.
I'm not.
Yeah. So it's interesting.
God.
So okay, so they're a democracy. Do they have senators or congressmen
What does it
in
take?
China?
Well, there's about 1,000 members of their National People's Congress, and then obviously they have a system of local people's
And
Congresses.
so you don't think those
But
elections
no,
are
I'm going
rigged?
to test you. I'm going to test you. What does it take to get on the ballot in China?
What is it? A lot of money, power, and influence, and killing the right people.
Oh, that's weird, because
Jesus.
it's actually illegal to spend money on campaigning in China. There's actually a very specific
so
answer to
you
this.
think that a dissident Chinese person could run up against Xi Jinping right now? So let me ask you a question.
Yeah, is that true? Are there anti-Uyghur camp candidates in China? I have a feeling there probably aren't, but maybe I'm wrong.
How do you
you're
think?
you're
no,
pro
How do you
CCP.
think-
So you think it's okay?
How do you think elections work? How do you think elections work in China?
How do you? It's very simple. You're born into the right family. You have connections to the right people.
You can't answer.
What's Xi Jinping's
What
lineage?
does it take to
Well,
get on the ballot in China?
You have to have the
You
right
don't
connections.
know the answer.
Yes, I do.
No,
I do know. You can't
Have
just
you-
all of a sudden pop up.
Have you read the law? Have you read their
what
law?
happened to
I
Tank Man
actually
at
have
Tien-
actually
Hold on a
read
second.
through. No.
You
Hold
think
up, hold
the
up.
law actually
Here's
applies?
Chat. Okay.
So what happened to the Tiananmen Square?
She said, "Listen, chat," while looking at the camera. Oh no! Does this person stream a lot? Does I don't know. Does she have a channel? Let me see. I guess she got like a bit of a following from the Young Turk stuff, but listen, chat. It's crazy, chat. It's crazy that Charlie Kirk would say these things, chat. I don't know. Oh God. Talking to Charlie's chat. Well, is he live streaming this? Oh well.
Listen, this is the answer.
What
This is
happened
the
at
answer
Tiananmen
that
Square?
Charlie Kirk doesn't know because he has no idea how democracy
What happened
works
at
in
Tiananmen Square?
You need to get
How about
10
Tibet?
signatures to get on the ballot in China. That's it, 10 signatures. How
How-
many people does it take to start a recall in China?
How many?
Wait. I'm pretty sure you can't just say whatever the fuck you want in China, can you? Hang on. Like, have you seen what happens when independent journalists try to film from outside of the Uyghur camps? They get fucking police swarming them within like 5 seconds. You can say what you want once, yeah. I don't know. I just have a feeling, right, that the anti-Uyghur camp candidate isn't gonna get maybe get their 10 signatures and then they get thrown in jail. I don't know. Yeah.
How many temples did they destroy in Tibet?
How
Uh-oh.
many?
So you think you could recall Xi Jinping?
How many people do you think it takes to
You
get
understand?
a
I have to
recall?
be honest. You are such an unbelievable fool to believe that China actually has a democracy.
Well, look, here's the thing. They've tripled their average wages. They've eliminated extreme poverty. They have amassed popular support in China. They have the strongest economy in the world. And right now, they are.
How many people
through
live in abject
peaceful
poverty in Western
international
China?
trade, through
More
peaceful
people than the
international
population
trade.
of America do not have access to clean water or toilets, and that's your idea of lifting people out of poverty. Let me ask you this question. 26 million people forcibly locked.
When you hear about people who don't have access to, like, what do they say, clean water and toilets in Western China, when you talk about abject poverty in China, don't Don't cackle. Rule number 5, chat. Don't cackle like a fucking psycho. Jesus Christ. That laugh needs to be on a soundboard. That's a bit mean. Is it? It sounds like when you're cleaning a window.
Of lifting people out of poverty. Let me ask you this question. 26 million people forcibly locked down in Shanghai. Cats are being put into entire bags and murdered. If you have COVID, that's your idea of a good society? 26 million people being forcibly locked down in China
How
at a
many
moment's
people
notice?
are permanently disabled because of COVID in the United States? How many people died in
I don't
the
know.
United
Ask
States?
the country that designed the virus.
How many-
Your
Oh
favorite
my
country.
god, Charlie Kirk. No. Charlie Cuck. Oh shit.
You
The
think they
CCP.
designed the virus?
Where did it come from?
What do you mean, where did it come from? Like you
Where
gotta be
did the
different.
virus
so
come
you're
from?
peddling conspiracy theories. Look, I have
What country did it come from?
I have a master's degree in biosecurity and biodefense.
Oh, so you must be so
Okay.
smart. Where did the
Yeah.
country come from?
No,
Where
no,
did it
no.
come from?
Here's the thing, Charlie. Listen up. Did you know that there were American scientists working in that
Okay,
lab?
we need
What's
to-
the name of the lab?
In the Wuhan
Oh, so
lab.
it came from China.
It came from
Really?
China. Yeah.
Oh,
diseases
so
come
it's
from all
the
over place.
Chinese virus.
No,
Oh my
it's not the
God,
Chinese.
What
Charlie
country did it
Kirk.
come from then?
How many strains of coronavirus are like? How many types of coronavirus are there?
There's plenty. There's Omicron, there's COVID-19, there's the original strain, but it was
No,
originally
the original
developed.
strains. No. See, you've listed 3.
There's-
The reality is there's different types of coronaviruses
Okay,
that
we need to
exist
step
in the
things up,
world,
guys,
that
don't worry.
exist in the world.
We got
that aren't
this.
developed anywhere. Like
No,
cats have their own
no,
coronaviruses.
of course, but which one was developed in the
dogs
lab
have
in
their
China?
own
There we go.
coronaviruses. There's no you think that the American scientists that were working in that same lab right next to those Chinese scientists, you think that they were secretly malicious
No.
actors?
See, you're putting
hold
words in
up.
my mouth. Hold on.
No,
Did it
no.
come from a lab or not, or did it come from a Himalayan
No,
bat
of
lab?
course it didn't come from a lab.
Oh, you think it didn't come from a lab?
No, yeah, because
Oh,
I
so
live in a
you-
real world. I
you
live in
are
a
an
real
idiot.
world, okay? I live in the real
Like,
world.
you understand
I
that?
don't think it's been completely written off that it might have come from a lab, is it? Like, it's just that we don't know for sure. It was it the lab and the wet market are the two competing potentialities, although it's more likely to still be the wet market, but we don't know. I don't know. Fuck that.
Every single
We ain't gonna find the answer here, guys.
person worth their salt looks at the strain and they understand that this was bioengineered in a lab. Fauci himself agrees to that.
What do you think would tell me? Because apparently you're the biologist here, right? How do you
Well,
tell
I do
the
know what a
difference?
man and
No,
a woman
no.
is. Do you?
Tell me the
Oh my
difference.
God.
Tell me the difference, okay? Tell me the difference.
Are we done with the
between
Soviet?
How do you tell the difference between a man-made virus and a non-man-made virus?
There's a lot.
What do you-
Sequencing, everything from how it's compiled,
What
mRNA
sequences?
type technology.
What sequences? What type of sequences are you
According to
looking
Anthony
for?
Fauci's own emails to Hugh Albatross on January 31st, on Friday evening, he said, quote, "This has every single marker of a man-made laboratory-created virus." That's Anthony Fauci's own declassified emails to the CDC and the NIH. Not to mention the thousands of other scientists that have looked at the strain, and they say the way that the proteins are correlated, the way that this is put together.
Wait. What do you mean proteins are correlated?
The way that is put together.
You're just throwing words together.
Hold on.
This is a word
Okay,
soup,
yeah, my
buddy.
language might be a little sloppy, but the people that
Your
understand
your
the
language
actual
is sloppy
sequencing
because
of
you didn't go to
the
grad
protein.
school
Hold on
and
a
you
second.
don't know what you're talking
Hold on a second.
about.
Charlie Kirk getting smashed here. Oh no.
So you think that where did the virus come from then exactly?
What do you mean, where did the
No,
virus
tell
come
me
from?
where it came from.
Yeah, well, so this is really interesting, right? See, because the type of virus that it is, right, little RNA viruses, they recombine a lot. That's one of the really interesting things about these types of viruses. And so what happens is when you have a couple of different strains that infect the same species at a time, the way that the virus reconstructs itself, which to be clear, we don't necessarily have a full understanding of how exactly that happens, but the reality is one of the central theories is this random assortment process where if you have multiple strains of a virus that is infecting one thing at a time, which is one of the reasons why bats in particular, because they're
So
capable
you do
of
believe it
holding
came from a
many
bat?
different, because they're capable
Man,
of
I got a serious
many
question.
different strains
I have a
of
question. Are you on
coronavirus at the
CCP
same
payroll?
time.
Because I don't think like a sane individual could believe this.
I wish. You think I got that kind
so,
of money?
oh, he wants to be a CCP agent.
You think you think China is funding me? That's so disconnected from
well,
reality.
no, I'm just going to be honest.
That's
like,
so disconnected
no
from
rational
reality.
person could believe the stream of absolute nonsense that you are. You'd have
If
to.
Charlie was smart, he would humble himself, maybe ask a couple of questions to de-escalate the argument, and then move back to move back to justifying show trials or whatever bullshit, or the RLC. I don't know.
You paid for this. Like, you're kind of like a walking hologram of insanity.
I don't know what to tell you, buddy. Like, but
I just hope it's worth it.
it sounds more like you're talking into a mirror at this point.
No, actually, you're the one that's defending the murderous genocidal CCP and the murderous genocidal Lenin
What was
Marxist.
okay, tell me this then.
Yeah.
What was the biggest genocide that ever happened in world history?
The biggest genocide, and it depends how you define a genocide. I would say
No.
Stalin's intentional massacre or Mao's intentional massacre,
So give me the
65 to
numbers.
70,
Add all those
70
up.
million people.
Add those up. 70 million?
Yep, intentional
Okay,
death.
Do I know the answer to this question? Biggest genocide in world history. What would a tankie say to that? How many people died in? I know in Rwanda the numbers were lower, but the death rate was higher at certain points. Like more people died in a smaller space of time, which is quite amazing considering they did it with what radio broadcasts and the Native American genocide. Oh yeah. Fucking Columbus. 800,000 in 100 days. Cambodia? I don't think it would be the Indian famines. But I want one that's actually recognized as a genocide, not just you guys giving me lists of events where a bunch of people died. All right. And barbarians. You guys want more people to die. Herero was not many at all, but it was still pretty mental. Proportionally quite high. Well, this with the Wikipedia is saying the Holocaust. They've also counted the Holodomor. Is the Native American even on here? Armenia, East Timor. They count the deportation of the Tatars as a genocide. Okay. Interesting. California? This number wasn't high enough. All right. What's the smallest? Uyghur. I'm surprised that Sabra Shatila is not on here. All right, let's see.
What about the 200 million people that used to live on this continent?
Oh, you mean the people that
Oh,
died?
the Native Americans, yeah. I don't know if you would count all those deaths as genocide, though, would you? Like spreading disease. I think with Columbus, what the fuck was the name of the group that he killed? Because what he did was deliberate. He put them in conditions where he wanted them to die.
I never catch the live streams but always watch after the fact, so you deserve this.
Well, thank you so much for the 10 euros, Aurelius. Really appreciate that. The Tejanos, I think that's... Yeah, how do you say that? The smallpox blanket was not... The smallpox blanket didn't work. You can't spread smallpox through blankets, I'm pretty sure. That was like... They attempted to do that, but that was just for like one tribe. I don't think that was like millions of people or... Yeah. 200 million. Well, yeah. How many people were actually? Columbus did it to. Yeah, Columbus intentionally wiped out a couple of tribes. Yeah, he did that. Yeah, that's like a yeah. That's actually like even by the UN definition that would be genocide because it was intentional. Because he put them in in conditions that would get them killed. And I think the birth rates of them like went from whatever to 0 as well. Columbus. The Arawak, was that them? And the Caribs. What's this one say? Because it was to do with living conditions. Our work was to exasperate, ravage, kill, mangle, and destroy. Small wonder then. Enclose them in pens bound for the slave market. Maybe find a better. Washington Post. Okay. Columbus built a fort where he left a few dozen of his crew, killed 2 people, took more hostages, sailed back to Spain. Gold. It was gold, wasn't it? Because there was some gold. Because some of them had golden trinkets, right, or golden jewelry, and he thought that there was like a much bigger supply than there actually was, and he enslave a bunch of them and put them to work to find this gold. But it turned out there wasn't actually that much of it. Like, he was obsessed with gold. He said that gold was like man's keys to heaven or some shit. Fucking freak. All right. Let's see. Died, sold in slavery, tried again for gold. Tiana were refusing to grow crops. Those who didn't bleed to death after their hands were removed began to die of famine and disease. Fled to the mountains. They were hunted down by dogs. Jesus. Sexually abused. Yeah, we know that. Population plummeted. Abducted indigenous people from other islands to work the fields and the mines. Mostly attribute deaths to spread of diseases, but pushed back. Populations were lower than previously estimated, and nexus of slavery, overwork, and famine killed more Indians in the Caribbean than smallpox, influenza, and malaria. So yeah, even no one would say that just like every death of disease would count as a genocide. It would just mean that, yeah, they would separate that from the intentional killings. They were extinct. Okay. Thanks for the $10, Cody Saunders. Really appreciate that.
Died of natural causes?
You think?
Holy
moly!
What 200 million people are you talking about?
You're indigenous.
You think there were 200 million people before we came here?
Yeah.
Like that's like 2/3 of the population of the United States right now. Oh God, it's gonna look so bad if she gets caught out inflating numbers. I feel like Charlie Kirk is the kind of guy who would know exactly how many indigenous people died. Oh no.
All living at once.
Yeah.
It wouldn't. No, the net number would be over time, because didn't Americans arrive there what 1500s, and all the way up until like last century, so, or the century before. Yeah, it wouldn't be all at once.
Where on earth do you get that number?
What do you mean? From anthropologists.
Oh, so you think we killed them all?
From anthropologists. Of course we killed them all.
So we killed 200 million people intentionally?
Yes, you think so.
What
So
a
just to
fucking
be very
moron.
clear.
Oh
right?
my God.
You're sitting here denying the genocide of indigenous folks.
Well, hold on, what-
You know who Teddy Roosevelt is?
Oh, you think Teddy Roosevelt's a mass murderer?
Yes, Teddy Roosevelt is a mass murderer. What do you think those Rough Riders did? Who do you think they were killing
They
out
won
in
the
the
war.
West?
Oh, the faux outrage is so cringe. Oh my God.
Or,
Murderer. Roosevelt is?
oh, you think Teddy Roosevelt's a mass murderer?
Yes, Teddy Roosevelt is a mass murderer. What do you think those Rough Riders did? Who do you think they were killing
They
out
won
in the
the
West?
war in Cuba.
What war?
What war? The war against
No.
the commies in Cuba. You know that
Wait,
Teddy
wait,
Roosevelt.
wait, hold
no,
up.
you
They
know
won
that,
war against communists in Cuba. Who's in charge of Cuba right now?
well, the communists. So,
So they didn't win the war then?
well, they won a battle.
They
so,
won. Oh, they won a battle. Wait, we've gone from
my
a war
God.
to a battle.
Well, they won
and
the
you're
Spa- they won the
accusing me of-
Spanish-
Charlie's got such a. He's so bad at that. Why is Charlie Kirk so fucking bad at this? Like, I feel like 200 million Native Americans after, like, that wouldn't even, again, like, the numbers wouldn't split hairs on this if it was like, it's probably not splitting hairs, it's probably a massive overstatement, but like, I wouldn't, after this person has just gone on a huge tirade about inflation of numbers and then just saying that 200 million Native Americans were all living in the United States at once in 1492. And they were all individually killed on purpose. Like, oh my God. Fuck me.
not living in reality.
They won the
here.
Spanish-American War, and then they won.
Okay.
So let me ask you a question.
But
though.
like, who else did he go to war against?
Well, Teddy Roosevelt actually won a Nobel Peace Prize for brokering peace between
I don't
Russia.
care about the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah, you don't care about much. Honestly, that's real.
How are an individual's wants
Jesus.
and needs represented best in a Marxist society?
Does anyone have the real number for how many Native Americans died? Oh, God. $55 million. And I'm guessing these are for all kinds of various reasons. Some would have died in battles. Some would have died in from disease. I'm guessing and quite a few would have also been killed because of intentional measures, which would be genocidal. I don't actually know what the numbers come up for genocide, though, of that. Yeah, the overwhelming majority will be disease, but that still doesn't count. But I want to know the ones who actually died from actually genocidal measures, like the Columbus, like the tribes that Columbus killed and shit. Which you're not going to get from just population before and after, right?
Oh, it's easy.
I'll ask the commie.
Obviously through their democratic structure. Like, the reality is, right, this is the thing, right? Obviously going back to the role of the state to serve the interests of the work.
Like here, they've actually even the Wikipedia's got so you've got the Kalinago, which was about 2,000 Caribs, yeah. Caribs. But I feel like for the genocidal killings, yeah, you'd be looking more into thousands, not millions. Cultural genocide, that would be a much more, yeah. Aristocracy said there were multiple genocides, which makes it, yeah, that's what it seems to be, yeah. That would be kind of obvious, yeah. I just couldn't remember the names of these tribes. I'm just wondering if there's actually if there's actually a credible figure for how many of these deaths were victims of genocide, rather than the 85 billion, whatever figure this person was giving. Does that figure exist? Or did the Mayas... I'm not going to find it by just counting the Wikipedia ones. That would be very sloppy. Oh well. Look up Counting the Dead research paper. Okay.
Working class to suppress the interests of capitalists, which is exactly why people like Charlie Kirk obviously are very unsettled with it, because the reality is that in America, working class people have to worry about the government kicking down their door for doing things like smoking marijuana. But in China, it's not the working class people that have to worry about, the government kicking down their doors. It's corrupt billionaires that have to worry about the government kicking down their doors. Just look, for example, giant tech companies making tons and tons of money in China with very little regulations. Well, what does China do? They put in tighter regulations on these tech companies, and then they take money from these tech billionaires, and then they give it to anti-poverty programs across the more rural parts of China in order to fund schools, food, things like that. Like, for example, China has this really, really great co-op development program, which is really, really great. So they combine ecological
I can tell you don't even
restoration.
believe this, by the
They
way.
combine.
You've got to be acting at this point.
Why do you think I'm acting?
Because
Is it because you're acting?
No, it's because the reality is so different of the millions of people in China that are literally forcibly held in their homes, the millions in concentration camps, the people that can't even breathe because the air quality is so bad. How about the underground Christians that are murdered in the streets for trying to go to church? So no, continue on your...
When people talk about Christians being murdered in the streets and people being held in concentration camps, don't cackle. Rule number 6.
Beautiful,
By the way, just to both sides, I also don't think it's consensus that the Great Leap Forward, for example, was a genocide, right? I don't think... Do people say that? Is this a thing people... I don't think that's what people say, apart from online. But there's maybe just me. If we're going to use the term properly, I feel like we've got to apply it consistently. Yeah, people don't say that. So why would you say the same thing about the fucking 50 million Native Americans? There will be particular tribes that were held in conditions that got them, and that were victims of genocide. But that doesn't account for every single death that happened between what, like 1492 and today. So, but that's the thing. That's again, what these people these morons do is they'll say, oh, every number about the Soviet Union is inflated. Every number about China is inflated. It's double genocide theory if you call the Holodomor a genocide, where just as many people died as they did in the fucking Holocaust. But also, did you know that 200 million Native Americans were genocided and, oh God, at once? They were all there at once. The Black Book of America.
Co-op in Beijing, like, yeah, we could grow vegetables in Shanghai, so it's so great. That's kind of the argument, right?
Look, what are we talking about vegetables in Shanghai? You're assuming that this is Shanghai. Obviously, Shanghai is like a giant urban city, right? The cooperative development, which is really cool, by the way, they're combining ecological restoration with these cooperative development. So, and, you know, with the schools in there, they have a requirement that the schools buy a lot from the local farms, right? 60% of the food, right, that they serve in the schools basically comes from local farms. So if you're talking about meeting people's needs, right, the farmers there have a need for economic development, right? So if you buy from the schools, if you buy the food from those farmers, that puts money into their pockets, and then they literally take that food and give it back to the school kids so that the school kids can have a full belly.
Do you think the Holodomor was I think, okay, my actual opinion, because I guess I don't really, I feel like under the current definition, no. But I don't know why intent doesn't include deliberately allowing something that's killing lots of people to carry on. Especially if it's particular like groups like Ukrainians and Kazakhs. I don't really know the argument for that, but by the current definition, like no, it doesn't have the same special intent as something like the Holocaust or Armenia or whatever the fuck else. Yeah.
Well, they're trying to learn. And this is the reality, Charlie. Like, you got to understand, like, if you think China's so dystopian, how come the incarceration rate in the United States is so much higher than China?
Well, because we have a rule of law, and they kill dissidents that break the rule of law. Tell me
Where
about
are all these dead people then? Where are these? They should show up.
Tell me about Foxconn.
What about Foxconn?
What do you know about it?
What about, you mean,
Rule number 7.
The crony plot that basically bulldozed an entire town in Wisconsin, kicking people out of their homes for a factory that never happened?
In China.
What about Foxconn?
So do you know they have to put up nets to try to prevent people from jumping out of
I think everyone knows this, no?
buildings?
So an American company was treating their workers improperly.
Hold on a second.
You know they took those nets
Chinese
down,
communist,
right?
A Chinese Communist Party partnership sponsored by Xi Jinping himself and his entire regime. So when you go to China, let me just tell you, you'll drive down the street and you will see dead people laying in the middle of the street. You will see people defecating. You
Go
will
to
see
China then. Go to China. Take a video.
Actually,
Bring
you know
these
what?
Cameras.
Go
to China. Take a video with these cameras. I dare you right now.
Unlike you, my wife lived in China for 6 months, and she'll show you the videos. She'll show you the images. They don't have a regard for human life. They don't value people as the individual.
We're the ones letting people die of coronavirus.
Hold on a second. The reality of China is that if you disagree with the government, you disappear, like Jack Ma. Yeah, if you disagree, you disappear.
Oh, because that was his only thing. He just
or
disagreed.
if you're a
he
dissident
wasn't a billionaire,
group, like
right?
the Uyghur Muslims, you get put in re-education camps where we have drone footage of people that are forced to eat pork against their religious conscience.
Are you talking about the East Turkmenistan movement?
No, I'm talking about the Uyghur Muslims that you're trying to spin in some sort of weird way.
We can't even look.
So what do they do to Tibet, though?
No. So the Associated Press actually went to Xinjiang, right? Which, by the way, anybody can go to Xinjiang if you want.
You know I'm not allowed into China, right?
Right. Okay, sure.
No, I'm not.
Right? Then
if I go to China, I get arrested. Great society.
Okay, cool. Then some.
This is the paper I'm supposed to read, apparently. Foxconn is Taiwanese. Yeah, but isn't it the biggest company in China or on the mainland? Wait, hang on. Wait, is that true? Did I just make that up? Oh, no, wait. Tell me about Foxconn, Google. It's headquartered in Taiwan, but I think most of its revenue comes from China. It's the largest employer in mainland China. And the working conditions, even if it wasn't a Taiwanese or American company, the working conditions, that's up to China, isn't it? That you have to be enforced by China. So if they have fucking suicide nets, that's kind of happening under the Chinese watch. I don't actually know what Xi's related. He said Foxconn is sponsored by Xi Jinping. Or what? What's the relation there by the CCP? anyone know that? What Foxconn's connection is to the CCP? Other than that, the CCP lets them operate in China and lets them be the biggest employer in the mainland? I thought it was mostly immigrant labor that they use from other Southeast Asian countries in Foxconn. Hmm. But I don't know what he means by sponsored either. Counting the dead, estimating the loss of life in the indigenous Holocaust, 1492 to present. David Michael Smith. Wow. Where's the number, cunt? Conclusion? I just want one number. Oh, damn it. Whoa. For the entire present-day United States, from 1492 to the present, the total number of indigenous deaths includes the 12 million estimated by Thornton, the additional approximately 790,000 that occurred in Hawaii, Alaska, and Puerto Rico, and about 220,000 excess deaths since 1900. Thus, the indigenous Holocaust in this country appears to have taken around 13 million lives. Signally, the terrific number of deaths was only a very small portion of the mind-numbing Holocaust through the Western Hemisphere. When he says Holocaust, though, are you talking about? I don't. So that's a bit lower than 200 million, but it's still higher than anything else that I've read about. So, but is this so? This is excess deaths. Is that what they're referring to? Because they've said excess here, but not all excess deaths are genocidal either. Like, is it? This person's trans and the pronouns are she, her. I know, I said that at the beginning. By the way, this person's pronouns are she, her. Sorry, okay. Read the whole paragraph. What, from here or the very end? There most definitely wasn't a genocide in Hawaii. I don't know anything about what happened in Hawaii. The deaths of the Native people that have occurred in the US since 1900 because of the legacy of colonialism and contemporary institutionalized racism must also be counted. Okay, so this is not. I don't know. This is so. Okay, I'll have to read the whole thing. Fuck. Resulting from wars, repression, and racist violence. Again, like if a far greater number of deaths have been caused by the harsh economic and health conditions experienced by many indigenous people. Again, these aren't genocidal unless those economic and health conditions are imposed intentionally, like with Columbus. That's why the conditions that Columbus imposed on the indigenous populations that he was in charge of were genocidal because he meant to do it. He meant to get them killed. Yeah. Births, deaths, mortality for much of the 20th century. Impossible to precisely estimate the number of excess deaths. I just don't like, yeah. But, I mean, I'm happy to accept that if it would have been around this number of excess deaths, but I want to know how many, because when I look up the genocidal numbers, it looks more like it's in the, like, thousands but I don't know how many tribes there were, so. Like, look at this, 100 million killed or died prematurely because of the Europeans and their descendants. Again, that could be like spreading disease, you know, it's like, which is not genocidal. I don't know. Between 40 and 50 million people lived in the hemisphere before it began. So this is the estimate that there were 50 million people living there when the Europeans arrived. A bit less than 200 million again, but okay. All at once. Okay. The official numbers range from 8 million all the way to 130 million. 8 million, like what kind of deaths though? Because I believe this number for excess deaths, but I'm going off of like not that much reading, so I don't know.
Somebody else go, because people did.
Oh,
Somebody from the
it's a wonderful
Associated
place,
Press, somebody
but
from
Just
Western.
again, you can't be so insistent that it's like it's racist to call the Holodomor a genocide, but then try to claim every excess death for the indigenous, for the Native Americans from 1492 all the way up to the present day as genocidal. You can't. It's so fucking stupid. Why would you try to do that in the space of the same conversation unless you're like just brain damaged anyway?
Westerners aren't allowed.
Look, if you you can. How come the Associated Press went to Xinjiang
No,
and asked
they want the
illegal Muslims-
right journalists to go, but if someone like me
What
were
do
to
you mean
show
the
up
right
in China,
journalists? You think that the Associated Press is out there carrying water for China?
hold on a second. The Associated Press also wrote in other articles that these were quasi-concentration camps.
Yeah. So like,
Yeah,
this is the thing.
yeah,
Like,
concentration
no,
camps,
like this
great,
is the thing. The
yeah.
Associated Press fundamentally
no.
has like this right-wing bias, right? Like that's just
Oh
ultimately
my
the reality
God.
of the Associated Press, because right. Like
The Associated
who
Press.
are funding Western journalists? Where do Western journalists get money? Is it maybe through capitalist institutions
government?
that have like their own
How does
interests
NPR
in
get their
these
money?
things, right? Like so let's think about this for a second. Right? So they
I wonder. Oh God, if I have the clip. This is the person who said that like puberty blockers were only there to appease transphobic parents. As in the idea that there should be a middle ground between a kid being diagnosed as trans or gender dysphoric and then actually getting HRT. The only reason that there's a middle ground there in puberty blockers is to appease transphobic parents. I don't even find that because it was somewhere on Twitter, wasn't it? Oh, did I actually? Oh God, that was so easy. Okay, there we go.
I think another thing that's important to remember when they talk about like puberty blockers is like, y'all know that like puberty blockers that's a compromise, right? Like the whole purpose of puberty blockers is to make like, uncertain parents more comfortable so that they just like delay going through puberty, right? Like that's literally it. That's all it is just like, how do we make cis people more comfortable that we have interrogated this child's gender enough to make sure? And I say child, but like if they're going through puberty, they're like in their preteens, right? And they're starting to figure themselves out, right? So it's not like 3-year-olds or anything that are being put on puberty blockers. These are like teenagers, right? Who have like stable gender identity. I think another thing that's important to remember when they talk about
Jesus Christ. It's at the very least a cultural genocide of 130 million. Yeah, but cultural genocide is a completely different term. Yeah, I know, I agree, but it's just a different term. Yeah.
the Associated Press actually goes and they write an article and they talk
Because
about
because again, if these tanky assholes want to include cultural genocide in the definition, then the Soviet Union committed like 400 cultural genocides, right? Not only of Ukrainians, of fucking Kazakhs or whoever else, of Tatars, like other cultures in Eastern Europe, but also of like the amount of different cultures within Russia itself. So, I mean, they're not going to bite that bullet, I don't think.
it, because the reality is we can have, if we want to live in the real world, we can have a conversation about whether or not China was going too heavy-handed in dealing with the East Turkmenistan movement, which is a terrorist movement. But a lot of Uyghur Muslims, even in Xinjiang, are happy that now they can finally drink alcohol without having to worry about bombing attacks and stabbing attacks. Now we can have a conversation about whether or not they were too heavy-handed, about whether or not they're racially profiling.
The propaganda is insane.
The reality is,
let's have a conversation about concentration camps. Like, maybe we shouldn't be forcing them to eat pork against their religious conscience. Murdering a lot of them is probably wrong. There's really
what does forcing them to eat pork have to do with counterterrorism or putting government officials into their houses to teach them to be more Han Chinese, which they did do as well. Yeah, I don't really know how much that has to do with or putting the kids into detaining the kids as well. What does that have to do with counterterrorism? Okay.
Conversation to be had. Like, you're defending.
By the way, that's the problem, because the problem is that Xi Jinping is a massive fucking nationalist who wants the Han Chinese culture to be the dominant culture like all over China, and the point is basically taking Uyghurs and turning them into Han Chinese people. That's why they did the internment camps in China. It wasn't because however many million people who went through those re-education centers were all terrorists. Okay.
Concentration camps, I think they're wrong.
If
and they're
there's a
evil, and
major
they're
terrorist
terrible.
movement in the United States, how do you think we should respond to that?
A major terrorist move. Well, they get. Actually, I can tell you exactly how it happens. Like when the Boston bombers tried to bomb in Boston, they get
No.
due
That's
process.
an individual. That's an individual bombing. Okay.
Yeah. So when ISIS pops up, they still get. If they're American citizens, they get due process rights.
How do you think? Really? The American citizens get due process rights. Tell that to all the Americans that we drone striked in the Middle East.
Hold on a second. No, wait. You mean Americans on American soil? That's what you asked. So it's not like a hypothetical.
Okay, well,
and I'm
let's
not
say-
going to keep on
let's
going
say
down
we get a whole
these
ISIS
weird rabbit
encampment.
holes, right?
Let's say we get a
So
whole ISIS
I just want to
encampment.
ask.
Tell me,
I want to
tell
ask.
me.
I want to ask what if they're American citizens, they get due process constitutional rights.
Do they really?
So yeah, I mean Timothy McVeigh got a trial.
Literally, the Supreme Court
Ted Kaczynski
just took away.
Ted
the
Kaczynski
Supreme
just got a
Court
trial.
literally
The
just
Zarnev
took
brothers
away
got a trial.
People's
Did
right.
they not? No.
Literally just took away people's
The
right
Sandy
to
Hook
present
shooter
new evidence in
killed
their
himself,
appeals.
but the
okay?
Parkland shooter.
The right to present new evidence and appeals is comparable to. Okay. Damn.
Got a trial. The Buffalo shooter gets a trial. We know that. Marina.
Yeah, because they're white supremacists. Of course, white supremacists are going to get a
What
trial.
about the
in a white
Zarnev? What about the
supremacist
Zarnev brothers?
society,
The
right?
Zarnev brothers, the Boston bombers. Did they get a trial?
Yeah, they got
Okay,
a trial.
so you just
But
disproved
you're
your own
talking
point,
about
Marina.
individual
Oh shit. Damn.
Where does cultural Marxism fall under your ideology?
Uh-oh.
Cultural Marxism is literally a Nazi conspiracy theory. Like literally. Like
Oh, no.
literally the Nazis in
Oh,
Nazi Germany
no.
invented the phrase cultural Marxism. The fact that you're asking me about it is a pretty telling to who you are.
Oh, you think I'm a Nazi?
Most definitely. I mean, at this point, like you've made it pretty clear.
Why am I a Nazi?
Because he thinks the Holodomor was a genocide. Unironically. That's all it takes. Hang on.
You ask me questions about cultural Marxism. That's literally like so. In case you
So,
don't
so
know,
let me ask you,
cultural
who's
Marxism.
Antonio Gramsci?
Okay.
Gramsci.
Isn't he a Nazi though? No. I don't use the word Nazi as lightly as some people on the internet like to, okay? He's right, he's far right. I would say he's that. Or the very, I don't know, by American standards, he's just right wing, right? Like, yeah, right wingers are like that. What the fuck is Nazi about Charlie Kirk? He's a right winger. I don't think has Charlie Kirk done like JQ stuff? Or the fact that he's a Trump supporter probably says he's like, I haven't heard enough of him, but I would probably not be surprised if like fascistic would describe him. But Nazi? Yeah, Groypers really hate Charlie Kirk, yeah, because they think he's too, like, because they don't think he's Nazi enough, yeah. I think he's still one of the conservatives repping Trump, though, right? Which would make him, I would probably say, a bit fascistic at least. But I don't know what his opinion is on January 6th or whatever else, or the election. But let me find something here. Trying to, might be a bit older.
Tell me Gramsci.
Who is he?
Why are you bringing Gramsci into this?
No, but tell me who he is.
The Italian socialist.
Yeah. So what phrase did he coin?
I don't know. You tell me.
Cultural Marxism.
Oh, okay.
Was he a Nazi?
Okay. No, Antonio.
Oh,
Gramsci
so maybe it
was not
didn't
a
come from the
Nazi.
Nazis.
Okay.
Well, cultural Bolshevism came from the Nazis. It depends on how you apply the theory. Yeah.
Literally. Look.
So
when
why
people,
would you
like,
say something so false when Gramsci himself came up with the phrase?
Do you know what
Yeah, the Tankie fucked up there by confusing cultural Bolshevism with cultural Marxism. But yeah, it depends on how you use the phrases. Yeah.
the conspiracy theory is around cultural Marxism? Then why it got so popular in Germany
Hold on a
in the
second.
1930s?
So let's go back to Gramsci. What did he write
Tons
about
of time.
cultural Marxism?
I don't know.
Letters
I'm not
from prison.
familiar with all of his
Yeah, you're not
writings.
familiar because you just keep on spouting out these things that call people Nazis, which is super unhelpful and not true. And so, yeah, Antonio Gramsci from prison said that Marxists must adopt a cultural framework alongside an economic framework in order to get the means of what they want to get done. That's not a conspiracy theory. Just read his book.
Okay, but that's different than the phrase cultural Marxism,
How is it
which is
different?
used. What do you mean? How is it
It's
different?
exactly the same thing.
No, it's not exactly the same.
Let's face it, though. Who uses the words cultural Marxism these days? Are you more likely to see
So,
it
what-
used by fascists or by people invoking Gramsci. I think you could probably ditch that one, Charlie.
Love you, box.
Oh, thanks for the $10. Really appreciate that. Oh, yeah, here it was from this video. I said, these people will call you a Nazi if you think the Holodomor was a genocide. That's all it takes. So I know this is rather tangential. This is from my video about Crimea. But why continue to parrot the fascist myth that was the Holodomor? Ukrainians, amongst many others, died due to a very well-established, not intentional famine.
Love you, box.
The characterization of the famine as some sort of evil Stalinist ploy to murder Ukrainians or something is utterly without foundation. At risk of jeopardizing my argument, go watch Badam Panada's video on this subject. Did I say the Holodomor was intentional in this video? What did I say? I forget. There's me. That's me. Oh my God, that's me. Holy shit, that's me. Okay, what did I say about... Did I say that? I just said that Crimeans died in the Holodomor. I think that's what I said. Hang on. 10 years later, as a result of Soviet collectivization, Crimea would suffer a similar fate again in the Holodomor. And infamous... That's all I said about the Holodomor, that a bunch of Crimeans died, and it's apparently a fascist myth. What, to call it the Holodomor? I don't know, like, this one really stuck in my head, because it's so impressive. Like, fuck me. But... yeah. They just heard the word Holodomor and they were like, it wasn't intentional. Like, wow, well done. What, so they did it because they were retarded? Yeah, well done, good. Yes. Off the hook. Plead insanity, yeah.
What happened is, in Nazi Germany, they spread this theory called cultural Marxism. They literally had this theory that Jewish people were secretly, like, bringing Marxist theory into the mainstream, and literally,
That's
like...
not at all what anybody on the right talks about.
Are you kidding me? What about the guy who literally just murdered a bunch of people talking about great replacement theory?
Oh, you think
You're
he's
telling
on...
me that Tucker Carlson doesn't talk about that on a regular basis?
Hold on a second.
Uh-oh.
So, first of all...
That's true. Tucker Carlson does. He does, yeah. That guy does great replacement theory a lot. You know what? I can't... Why did this happen? Oh, did Gramsci not even coin cultural Marxism? He coined cultural hegemony. Oh, okay. I knew Gramsci was a communist, yeah. But how did Tucker Carlson basically precipitate the biggest defamation case in American history over the January 6th stuff? To the point where Fox News people had to fucking, like, scramble to pay the settlement because they didn't want any discovery or anything, or any, like, further investigation. And Tucker Carlson did that. The biggest defamation case settlement in American history. Fucking Fox News scrambling in desperation to make sure that they didn't go to court or have any discovery or have any investigation. And he just, like, that story's just gone. Yeah, it was $800 million, no? $787 million, yeah. God damn it.
Buffalo shooter's disgusting and it's awful, and he was more of like a weird leftist than anything on the right. If you actually read what he wrote, he called himself a left-wing authoritarian, which sounds more like you.
He called him, the Buffalo shooter said he was a left-wing authoritarian when he was 14 years old. You dumb cunt, Charlie Kirk. Fuck off. Like, I mean, dishonest cunt, really. He knows. I think he knows. Yeah, the Buffalo shooter said he was a communist. I'm making the right person. The person who shot those black people in a store, right? Hopefully Benny knows this. Like, this is what he actually said. Call me an...
By the way...
Fuck. No, not a MAGA communist, as in he was like a communist when he was young and then he like changed into a white supremacist. Yeah. Oh my God. Call me an ethno-nationalist, eco-fascist, national socialist if you want. I wouldn't disagree with you. 14 words. He oscillated from extreme to extreme, such as from communism to fascism. Yeah, he was a communist when he was a teenager. Like a young teenager, like 14 or something. So, yeah, let's see if Benny's on it. Let's see if Benny's got the talking points. Ooh, let's go. Come on,
me.
Benny.
Look,
Come
Let me
on.
finish
The
talking.
Nazis pretended to
Secondly,
be on the left too, buddy.
Secondly,
Okay.
what is cultural Marxism? Cultural Marxism is developing a cultural framework of deconstructionism or postmodernism to try to break ourselves from the shackles of the Western tradition so that we can embrace the nonsensical economic ideas that you believe in. That's not a conspiracy theory, it's reality. And it was written by Gramsci himself. And if you're not familiar with those writings, well, then you're not.
Oh my God, someone in stream chat has just posted a fucking research doc on the Holodomor. Thank you so much. I will read that off stream. Thank you very much.
Really equipped to talk about cultural Marxism. You just keep on like, conspiracy theory. Like, yeah, actually, you're wrong. Like, go to the roots.
Sure, buddy.
Sure,
Is that
buddy.
your response?
Sure.
Thank you, Ben.
Wow.
Thank you, Charlie. How do people in a Marxist society overcome oppression?
Yeah, well...
They
see-
leave.
Okay, sure.
So
Oh
why
my
don't you live in a
God.
Marxist country? I'm just curious.
Why don't I live in a Marxist country? Well, I mean, aside from the fact that I was born here and I would like the United States to be a better place, the reality is...
This had Young Turks contributor written underneath. She was still for the Young Turks. Why do these organizations hire the most insane people? How did this person get through the vetting process and the interview or whatever for the Young Turks? Were the Young Turks just like, yeah, we like ideological variety, you know, Stalinists, fucking Maoists, serial killers? What?
Like, when it comes to overcoming oppression, I mean, just look at, once again, Vietnam, right? Vietnam invaded by the United States. Is that not oppression? Or what about North Korea, for example? In North Korea, we killed 1 out of every 5 people in their entire country. Is not the very minimum of evicting colonizers and evicting imperialist armies.
Hold on a second. Why did we invade Korea?
Why did we invade Korea?
I'm asking you.
No, you tell me. Because the truth of the matter is, their economy, like, so, first and foremost, they were, like, obviously, Imperial Japan was occupying Korea.
Maybe Hassan vouched for her. Oh no. Yeah, China invaded Korea as well. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Then you have the socialists that liberate Korea from Imperial Japan. Then you have all of these powers coming in the middle of Korea at the end of World War II and ended up splicing it up. So the reality is, one of the reasons why we invaded Korea is because we were deeply upset that anybody anywhere in the world would be socialist. Because do you think Korea is going to like invade the United States? Do you think right after World
let me ask
War
you a question.
II that they were about to invade?
Where is it a better place to live? Seoul, South Korea, or Pyongyang, North Korea?
I don't know. It depends on who you are.
I suppose that's true. That's very true. If you are Kim Jong-un, it probably is better to live in North Korea. Hey, thanks for the raid, No Justice. I really appreciate that. That's a fucking slam. Damn, Charlie.
You believe there's not even a question of who, like an average everyday worker, Pyongyang, North Korea, or Seoul, South Korea, right now.
It really depends
Right
on who
now.
you are. Ask poor people in South Korea how they're feeling about their system of government.
They are kissing
Why?
the ground
Like,
every day
no.
that they are.
Why are there so many defectors that defect from North Korea that then defect back to North Korea?
Name one.
What do you mean? I'm not going to list them off by name.
Name one.
Well, you can just Google it.
Oh!
Does that... Do they defect back or do they get like don't they get let me see what happens. What happens to South Korean defectors, North Korean defectors who go to China get sent back? I don't know what happens to the ones who go to the South. Apart from that, people in the South probably hate them. Separation from family. Shunned. Do South Koreans, they get automatic citizenship in the South, but they face challenges. I would love to know if there's a number. Very few. Very few. Okay, let's start with this. The Interpreter, is that Western propaganda? Probably. Based. All right, let's see. No, yeah. I think if North Korean defectors go to China, they get sent back, don't they? Did I just misremember that? Or North Korean defectors who go to China? Who enter China illegally are apprehended and imprisoned. They are not permitted to leave, and they are handed over to the government of North Korea. Okay, yeah, I knew that. Okay, nice one. Countless challenges. Adopting modern society, stable jobs, making ends meet. North Korean defectors earn about 74% of the average income of South Korean employees. Is it true that like North Koreans? Yeah, no, I feel like I've heard this before. That South Koreans are like very discriminatory to North Korean defectors. Yeah, feel like strangers in a strange land. So it was 18.8% of surveyed defectors said they had thought about going back to the North or expressed regret, which does mean that despite the challenges and despite being away from your family and being immigrants and all that, most of them probably prefer, unless it's like 70% says they don't know. 1 in 5. That's a valuable stat to have. 300 defectors, it's probably a reasonable sample size. Wait. What 30? Why are you guys saying 30 to 10,000 or 34,000 to 29? What are you saying there? What? Is this on my screen? Where are you? The fucking. Is that the number of people who actually went back? That would be good. I want a number of people who actually go back. Could they go back? Wouldn't they? Would there not be repercussions for going back? Psychological isolation. Damn. Economic issues. Those poor North Koreans. 29 people went back. Where? Where are you getting that? Jesus Christ. How many South Koreans went back? No, North Koreans. North Korean defectors went back. 20. Oh, that's a spicy meatball. Oh, thank God for these Western propaganda outlets. Thank you, God. They each and every one of them said to President Trump that their country yearns for freedom, and that the Holodomor was a genocide, and that 800 billion people died in the Great Leap Forward. Based.
You can Google it. Have you ever heard of Yemeni Park?
Yeah.
What about her?
What about her? Do you want to know?
Yeah, the young lady whose father was murdered. She was sold into sex slavery, barely escaped to China, came to America.
29 out of 34,000. I love these. You know what? Big numbers, they're okay. You know, people don't think that much about the smaller numbers that can shock you, you know? Like when people ask you how many Jews live in X Middle Eastern country, you know? Like, I think in Lebanon there are 19. I'm like, whoa, that's a low number. I think there's one known Jew who lives in Afghanistan.
Tell us what's really going on in North Korea.
Okay, buddy. Like, why is she doing conferences with like the Heritage Foundation? These
Because she'll go to anyone that.
Did he leave? What? Oh, did he leave after the Taliban took over? Probably. I wouldn't want to be Jewish living under the Taliban, bro. That sounds fucking shit.
that will listen to our first-hand perspective. So
Okay,
hold on a second.
or maybe perhaps
North
hear me
Korea
out,
is
hear me
a-
out. Did you know that there's like a whole game show in South Korea where they bring on defectors and they're incentivized, right? The more like over the top their story is, right? The more they get paid, right? And the more they keep getting brought on these shows. So the reality is, nobody's going to say that North Korea is a perfect place to live. Nobody's going to say that,
No,
right?
it's
Nobody's
hell.
going to say that there aren't terrible things.
It is
But the
hell.
reality is, there's explicit financial incentives for people to inflate stories
So
about
let
North
me give you
Korea.
an example that isn't a financial incentive.
Okay, sure.
You look from space at night on South Korea and North Korea. North Korea is dark,
no.
and South Korea has lights all over.
Do you think that has anything to do with the sanctions that the United States has on North Korea?
It's North Korea that has imposed a lot of sanctions on the West as well. They
Oh,
developed nuclear
because-
technology
oh,
against us.
sure.
North Korea could make some choices against us
Okay,
immediately.
who are their
Uh-oh.
major economic trade partners? Do you think
China, Iran.
Okay, two. You've named two.
Yeah, China and Iran. That's about it. No one else really trade.
Who's
They're
the
a
United-
pariah
who's the United
state.
States got? Why?
Why is North Korea a pariah state? Because they murder their own citizens and re-educate them?
Or maybe because the United States
Because
has
they have
gone
gulags all across
out of its
North
way.
Korea?
Maybe it's because the United States has gone out of its way to make sure that every country that we deal with
This is
isn't
important.
allowed to
Let-
trade with North
let's
Korea
finish
at
the
all.
point.
You think
So,
maybe that has an impact on
Our
their economic
Our
development?
intervention in Korea helped create South Korea and make sure that the entire Korean peninsula wasn't going to be.
You know what's weird is that tankies will say that like social democracy only works because we exploit the fuck out of the third world, right? So the third world trades with us only to enrich us at their own expense. But then also, countries like Cuba and North Korea are only bad because of trade sanctions and embargoes. As in, like, they'd be fine if only they got to trade with the United States. Does that make sense? I know, like a bit of a contradiction. Okay.
What
From all
happened
of
in
North
South Korea
Korea.
in the 90s?
Hold
How
on
did
a
they
second.
treat disabled people?
Let-
Because
let-
here's the
let me
thing.
finish.
They literally, you want to talk about concentration camps.
Let me finish.
South Korea was putting people in concentration camps.
It's-
They were
it's-
putting
it's so-
disabled
Also,
people.
aside from the fact that social democracies do mostly trade with other liberal, yeah.
Patently ridiculous.
homeless
Let me finish.
people.
Thanks to America's intervention, 100 million South Koreans right now.
Like, it's true. It's true that your economy does struggle like more if you have embargoes and sanctions on you, but you can't square that with also the countries in the West only do well because of their exploitation of the third. Because if if North Korea had their sanctions lifted, or if Cuba had their sanctions lifted, aren't you also implying that they would only trade with the United States to get exploited by them to enrich Western society at the expense of themselves? You can't have both of those opinions. You either think trading with the United States helps you or it hurts you.
live in a free democratic society. Absent America's intervention,
Their society's
they
not
would
democratic.
They would be all like North Korea, which they are poorer, they are unhappier, they have no freedom.
Do you support
They have no
freedom?
I do
Freedom-
support
what about
freedom.
freedom of speech? Do you support the freedom of speech?
They have freedom of speech in Pyongyang.
Do they have freedom of speech in South Korea?
Of course they do.
Really? Why
Versus
is it illegal?
Pyongyang.
No.
Of course they do.
It's actually illegal to say positive things about North Korea in South Korea. So I thought you just said they have freedom of speech,
Of
but you
course
don't
they
even
have-
know basic
hold
laws.
on a second.
You don't know basic laws.
There's probably a pretty good reason for that, but quite honestly,
So wait, they have a good reason. So like for example,
but again,
like,
it's a
like
general
you-
defense.
So that law is real. Apparently, in recent years, prosecutions have been rare. In North Korea, it's probably not so rare. It's illegal to show disrespect or make jokes about North Korea, current or former leaders or their families. It's illegal to talk about. This is for smart traveler. That's probably a bit shit from South Korea. I don't know. I think they should do that.
Can you own
okay,
property
so
in
you're
South
against
Korea?
freedom of speech
Yes.
then?
So
You're against freedom of
Can you
speech
start
then?
new companies like Hyundai and Samsung? Yes. Can you empower entrepreneurs? Do you have the rule of law? Yes. All of that in South Korea. In North Korea, you can't own property. You can't say anything good, bad, or indifferent. You are silenced by force in North Korea. And
How
so,
come they have a lower incarceration?
Rule number 8. People talk about the lack of human rights in North Korea.
Rate than we do.
who in North Korea?
Yeah.
Oh, you trust the North Korean numbers. Everybody's
We're not talking about the North Korean
the
numbers.
whole
If you look at like
country
the
is
CIA's
incarcerated.
Numbers, you look
Everybody
at the CIA's
is.
numbers about North Korea.
Everybody in North Korea is
So you're
incarcerated
just
by
making up
living there.
platitudes. Like,
No,
come
it's
on.
not. The
Yeah.
whole country's an open-air prison state.
Okay, sure,
Next
buddy.
question.
Ben, is there room for religion in Marxism?
Yeah, most definitely, 100%.
How-
Like for example, right? Like
Not Uyghur Muslims. Not the.
Let's take people like Fidel Castro, right? Fidel Castro was Catholic, right? And he was one of probably the best Marxists out there, right? There's a reason why people like
Slaughtered
Nelson...
15,000 people with firing squads. But
There's
yeah,
a
great
reason
guy.
why people like
Damn.
Nelson Mandela referred to him as like an inspiration and a friend, right? So are you...
Yeah, Nelson Mandela also referred to Queen Elizabeth II as a friend. Nelson Mandela was is an excellent diplomat. Yeah, Nelson Mandela likes Castro because the Cubans fought a fucking war against the South African army in Namibia and got them to end the occupation. That's why Nelson Mandela liked Castro, because he fucking like rammed the South African army. But he also, again, Nelson Mandela also liked the Queen because she had a rift with Thatcher over the sanctions. The Queen wanted sanctions and Thatcher didn't.
Against Nelson Mandela? Do you think
Part of
Nelson Mandela
part of his
was a bad
ideology was
person?
terrible. He was a communist, but part of it was good.
Do you think... Okay, so...
But Nelson Mandela was a communist. I'm not going to...
Oh, okay.
He was.
Okay.
Nelson Mandela was not a communist. I don't know why right wingers say that Mandela was a communist. What?
So,
Yeah,
so
I mean,
like the reality...
Communists, if they know anything about Mandela, actually don't like Mandela because they think he was a sellout. They think he was too appeasing to the white population. When the ANC were debating whether or not they wanted to employ violence, they decided they would, but they decided to employ violence that was only officially their policy was to sabotage infrastructure, not to target people, because they didn't want to alienate the white population, and they wanted the white population to understand that they were not going to get fucking slaughtered as soon as apartheid ended. And that was a conscious effort from him. I wonder if I can find that speech that he gave about it. I think it was actually said in his court case. Let's see. Mandela on trial. Sabbath. This is them talking about the types of violence: sabotage, guerrilla warfare, terrorism, open revolution. They chose sabotage because it didn't involve, this is from him speaking in court. We chose to adopt the first method. Sabotage did not involve loss of life, and it offered the best hope for future race relations. Bitterness would be kept to a minimum, and if the policy bore fruit, democratic government could become a reality. The initial plan was based on careful analysis of the political and economic situation of our country. We believe that South Africa depended to a large extent on foreign capital and foreign trade. That's still true. That's also why expropriation policy from the EFF is fucking so stupid, because this would fucking blast out the window. But anyway, we felt that planned destruction of power plants and interference with rail and telephone communications would scare away capital from the country, thus compelling the voters of the country to reconsider their position. But we in Mkonto, I think that's how you say that, weighed up the white response with anxiety. The lines were being drawn. The whites and blacks were moving into separate camps, and the prospects of avoiding a civil war were made less. The white newspapers carried reports that sabotage would be punished by death. If this was so, how could we continue to keep Africans away from terrorism? So I think this line here about race relations, yeah, majority of contemporary Twitter communists are probably going to be very unhappy with this suggestion, right? Because the average online communist thinks that the better solution to South Africa is to throw all the fucking Boers and white South Africans into the sea, right? But yeah.
His advocacy against apartheid was great, but his economic views were terrible.
There's actually a really great religious philosophy. I don't know if you're familiar with liberation theology, for example. Actually, one of the reasons why the
Latin America,
CIA
it's a
blend of Catholicism.
went into places like El Salvador to murder people was because liberation theology was so popular, right? Basically, the idea that, like, under Christianity, right, like Jesus was sort of the God who riots, right? Who goes out of his way basically to stand up for people who are oppressed, goes out of his way to stand up for people who are.
I think even liberation theology, didn't they kind of rein the movement in at one point when they realized that they didn't want people to, when they didn't want to kind of like lose that religious control? That's a long time ago since I've read about that. That was from uni. Because they wanted to have like liberation theology. I think they wanted to push for like progressive action, but only to a point that didn't drift into secularism. Yeah.
Marginalized, right? He literally said, the meek shall inherit the earth. In fact, the only people that Jesus ever said wouldn't go to heaven were rich people.
He never said that. He said
he literally did.
It's a misquotation. He said it's harder to get into heaven. But and by the way, if you go back to the actual Koine Greek, it is lover.
Well, it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle. Like that. The point is, it's basically impossible. But okay.
Of money, not rich. But that's fine. You're not totally wrong.
Okay, right? So like the reality is like there are tons of different religions that are like completely compatible with Marxism, and there's nothing inherently against it. Now, Marx had specific theories about religion.
He said
and
it was the
Marxism.
opiate of the masses.
Yeah, he said it's the opiate of masses, which a lot of people misinterpret, right? A lot of people misinterpret. See, what Marx meant by that was that religion plays a very critical cultural role in alleviating pain and suffering that marginalized people feel, which is very understandable, right? Like if you're struggling in a very difficult world, like obviously turning to religion, believing in that there's a higher power, believing that even in your difficult circumstances, that if you work hard and you be the best person you can be, there's going to be an afterlife waiting for you. Where you'll be able to live in peace, right? Like none of that is contradictory to capitalism, but it is about the reality, or none of that is contradictory to Marxism. But it's central to this reality is the idea that so many people, they only have religion as an outlet for self-expression because capitalism forces people into such brutal conditions.
Capitalism forces people into what conditions?
Brutal conditions.
Such as?
Compared to, even a Marxist shouldn't really say this. Compared to what? Does this Benny person feel like she's living in brutal conditions compared to feudalism, compared to like slave economies? A Marxist-Leninist would, though. Yeah, well.
Such as, are you kidding me? There's literally right-wingers out there that are calling for child labor to be brought back. Are we not going to talk about the way coal miners get treated in the United States of America?
You were supporting the CCP, and they're like the heart of child labor in the world. So, like, don't give me that. Child labor is illegal in America. So how is that exactly the case?
Look, where was China 20 years ago versus where's China
Poor,
today?
and they got rich largely because
So child labor is okay if you're growing, like if it stimulates economic growth. So in 2010, 7% of children aged from 10 to 15 were working. Jesus. It's okay though. We got GDP growth based.
offshored our labor. So hold on, let's be very clear about the China stuff before I go back to another point I want to make. China got rich off of our deindustrialization and a massive labor arbitrage because they could undercut our wages.
And whose fault is that?
Well, of course it's our own fault. That's not the point. The point is that it wasn't because of the brilliance of Xi Jinping. It was because of the treachery and their ability to exploit their own citizens as pseudo-slaves to go make a bunch of plastic and fentanyl and bring it back into the West.
See, but this
they
is
don't
the problem.
create new stuff. They don't start new companies. They simply
Wait,
just
wait,
say,
wait.
we have more people.
Are you telling me that Huawei? Are you telling me Huawei
They're a
is
bunch of
creating new
thieves.
stuff?
They steal Western technology.
Sure,
Yeah.
buddy. Okay. Then who's sending vaccines all over the world?
Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson, and Moderna.
Really? Because the United States is sending that many vaccines?
Well, I hope we don't send that many vaccines, but I mean, if
literally
anti-vax
last
Charlie,
year,
oh no.
China
I
was
hope we're not sending
about
vaccines.
half of all the vaccines that they made around the world. They were sending to other countries, like half of all the vaccines that they made. There's a lot of people that are vaccinated today, specifically because of the hard work and dedication of people in China.
I hope nothing happens to them.
Right.
I wouldn't trust the Chinese vaccine, let alone a Pfizer vaccine.
Jesus
but
Christ,
yeah, so
Charlie.
I just want to get to this. I have a more interesting, I think more important question. Do you think human beings are naturally good?
Biggest international distributors of vaccines, COVID vaccine. I'll just say vaccines in general is probably more important than just COVID. It's companies. I want countries.
Human beings are naturally social, right? Which means that human beings could be good or evil, right? The reality is that, like, what makes us good is also what makes us evil, right? Because the reality is, like, what would you do for your family, right?
A lot.
You would do a lot, right? I think we would all basically do anything for our families. And that is both what makes us so capable of goodness and kindness, but it's also what makes us so capable of vicious evil. Because the reality is, if we thought that people were threatening our families, we would do a lot of terrible things, right? But if we work together with other people and other families, and we extend our minds to understand that we have a shared sort of societal experience, then we're going to do a lot of good things for each other. So ultimately, when it comes to whether or not human beings are good or evil, we're just...
Oh, I think it's here. Annual vaccine production. EU exports. The exports are low for China. What was this person saying? United States 3. What are these numbers though? This is before the pandemic. Okay. Don't know if that changed. Oh, there's China's exports. Boo. So after the pandemic, so yeah, pandemic response, China produced and exported more. USA didn't export that much at all. Huh? Belgium, what are you talking about? Fuck off.
naturally social. We want to fit in and be part of a society. So ultimately, it really depends on the way society is structured that determines whether or not we end up being good or evil. But it is all basically from us being pro-social.
So why is it that every civilization encounters the same problems then, regardless of its circumstances?
What do you mean every civilization? What do you mean the same problems? What do you think these problems are?
I'll articulate it. From the Aztecs to the Incans to the Mayans to the Egyptians, the Indus River Valley, to the Chinese Empire, the British Empire, Attila the Hun, to Genghis Khan, to Julius Caesar, to the Greek or Roman Empire, they all go through the same sort of cycle.
So,
where they start to allocate power to a lesser and lesser group of people. They start to then create a pseudo-dictatorship under the false promises of empowering people. And then the cycle of selfishness.
What the fuck is this?
I'm here to talk to you today about music, arts, fashion, one of the greatest problems that our generations are facing. The biggest scourge that affects our society. Against all of the cultural and social progress we've seen is the battle against intellectual thought. Are you guys comfortable with that? This is a war against critical thinking, battle against intellectualism. It's a war against rational behavior.
It's a what? It's a war. That's true. Yeah.
And we're not even aware of it.
I'm not even aware.
And that's terrifying. Whew. What kind of an example are we setting? The problem with America is that because of cultural imperialism, we are literally teaching the rest of the world how to think, what to wear. The Kardashians are lying to you. Culture used to be the
Is this old? Why have I not seen this? There's no way he did this recently. The Kardashians. What the fuck?
Backbone of the resistance. All it seeks to do is sedate the masses. Culture now seeks to appeal to our primal urges, our base needs. We're now in the age of mediocrity. You can bring about the positive change you want to see in this world, because the revolution will not be televised. Only you can bring about the revolution by taking it to the street. Keep resisting.
Oh my god.
The girl's gonna be upset if we don't talk about fashion. You know what I mean?
Holy shit. Look no further for proof that co-optation is a far more effective strategy to undermining potentially revolutionary forces than outright reactionary opposition. Oh my god. The elites don't want you to see this. Bro, I didn't want me to see that. Holy fuck. I want more people. Yeah. I can't think of a better counter-revolutionary strategy than just to show that to fucking everyone. If someone asks you, what's socialism in the United States? Who's the biggest voice for socialism in the United States? For the... just show them this. Yeah, that's it. What do you think? Feel like becoming a socialist, pal. Jesus Christ.
Murder, strife, division, famine continues on end. And the only thing that ever broke that cycle was the West. The only thing that ever broke that.
Okay, how come the Iroquois Confederacy didn't have those problems?
Oh, so tell me about the Iroquois Confederacy and the great contribution to humanity they made.
I mean, do you like the United States Constitution?
Oh, you think that our Constitution is derived by the Iroquois Confederacy?
I mean, ask Benjamin Franklin. He would admit it very directly and explicitly.
He didn't write the Constitution.
It doesn't matter, right? All of the founding fathers
No, it actually
played a
does
role
matter.
in it. No,
let me tell you. If you actually, hold on.
Well,
So
ask James Madison.
yeah,
it,
how
right?
about? So let me get this. What Federalist paper is the Iroquois Confederacy mentioned in?
It doesn't matter. The
Yeah,
Federalist
because it
Papers.
really wasn't
Do
an
you think
inspiration.
the Federalist Papers were the only thing that were written back then?
No, but it was the most. Hamilton, Madison, and Jay went through private musings of why they wrote the Constitution
And do you
and
think that
defended
they
it.
didn't care what Benjamin Franklin
Hold
or
on a
George
second.
Washington
So
had
wait.
to say?
So I want to make sure I understand this right. So the Iroquois Confederacy, you think, is where we got separations of power, separated powers, consent of the governed, independent judiciary, and consent to the governed. Not the Pilgrim colonies, or the Bible, or the Mayflower Compact, or the Magna
I
Carta.
don't give a fuck about. I don't think I trust either of these morons on the founding of America. Oh no, we have to. Oh, there we go. That's better.
Or the writings of
No,
Augustine
of course
Aquinas,
not.
Hume,
And
Burke, Locke,
none of the people
or
that were
Hobbes.
alive at the time. John Locke. Look, where do you think where do you think these people said that they got their ideas? Like, the reality is, why do you think the Enlightenment came after all of these colonizers started visiting people in North America?
so you believe in this like weird, unfounded, mystical belief that
It's
we
not
stole
unfounded. This is
from
actually
the
like
indigenous people.
This is actually a very standard understanding of world history. If you have even a marginal
Hold on a
understanding
second.
of
So
anthropology.
you think that John Locke stole from indigenous people?
Are you kidding me? All of the Enlightenment philosophers stole from
All of them.
indigenous folks.
So what did Kant steal from the indigenous people?
Like, are you kidding me?
The categorical imperative came from some tribesmen.
No, not the categorical imperative.
What the fuck is this person talking about? I think you can make the argument that some Enlightenment ideas came from, was it Aksum in Ethiopia? There were some Enlightenment-esque ideas that appeared a little bit before Hume and Kant and all that, but like, you don't want to push that narrative too far the other way, because then you're suggesting that like, then you end up in fucking black supremacy. But I don't know where the fuck this is going. Well, who was the person? Zera Jacob, yeah. That person seemed very ahead of his time. But I don't know if it's ever been proven that like Locke stole from that person, but I know, like, I think there is a Jacob quote that seems like very, like, I think it was something like literally like all men are created equal or some shit like that. I think he said it like basically word for word way before Locke said it, but I don't know.
They don't have to necessarily steal every single
That's
thing.
so let me get this.
But like, the reality
Machiavelli,
is,
what did he study? Because we didn't colonize when Machiavelli started writing.
well,
what did he
Machiavelli is
steal?
a really interesting character.
No, what did he steal from indigenous people?
I mean, I wouldn't say that like Machiavelli, to my understanding, he didn't really interact with people like indigenous folks
Yeah, but
in North
okay, so
America,
nothing
right?
there. How about Aquinas?
Do they mean that the wealth was stolen? And then with the wealth, they had the free time to do philosophy. Yeah.
Yes. What did he study? What did he steal from indigenous people?
What do you think these people like? This is the thing. This is the whole mythology of the
No, but
United
just
States.
build out
It's
your argument,
completely
please. Like,
unhinged,
prove it.
right?
Like, give specifics because it's rather critical, right? So, like, what did Aquinas steal from indigenous people?
Like, okay, you're naming.
It wasn't stolen, but Jacob thought of it and wrote it down first. Well, yeah, I don't know if there's evidence that they actually read Jacob and stole it, because I don't even know if that work from Axiom ever made it over to Europe. Like, it might have. There was a lot of trade going on between those areas, but I don't know.
Random people. I'm
No,
talking
they're
about
not
the
random
founding
people.
fathers in the United States.
Okay.
Did Aquinas write the Constitution?
Aquinas inspired every single founding father. They all read it. They knew it backwards and forwards. John Adams said no individual theorist or author was more instrumental to my metaphysical worldview than Thomas Aquinas.
That's because look. Are we going to ignore the fact that the founding fathers were incredibly racist? Do you think that they were?
okay.
Like,
So you think they were racist?
of course they were racist.
So then,
Yeah, they were probably. Come on, Charlie. I think they were probably quite racist. Yeah, the swarthy Germans and shit. Even that, like, not just black people and slaves and shit, but also like, was it Ben Franklin? He didn't even like Germans.
why did they try to
where
abolish
did George
slavery?
Washington get his teeth?
Okay, so how many states decided to
No,
make
no,
the Northwest
actually,
Territories?
answer this question. Answer this question. Where did George Washington get his teeth?
They were blended individuals, no doubt. mixed. But you know what you and I both have in common?
No, I want to answer the question because I want to make sure that your audience knows
I would
exactly
assume
where
that he
George
probably
Washington got
them.
his teeth.
So to make him look bad, you're going to say he got him from a slave or he exploited somebody. But here's the truth about
He
George
ripped
Washington.
teeth out of people's heads while they were alive. He ripped teeth
Here's
out
the
of people's
truth
heads
about George Washington.
to put in his mouth.
Outside of your Nicole Hannah-Jones highly emotive argument, everybody has something in common. We're born into a
I
world.
love it how like it's just like it's two fucking like Reddit hacks just smacking into each other. The fact that Charlie Kirk has just been so highly emotional about everything that happens in the CCP or the Soviet Russia and all that, like all the emotive language, but as soon as it's a guy fucking ripping people's teeth out and putting them in his own face, it's like, well, we can't really be too don't be too hyperbolic about it. He was a mixed bag. Oh fuck.
We didn't create. And every one of these founding fathers were born into a world where slavery was everywhere. By the time they died, it was on its way out.
Do you know
That's
what
an
Thomas
incredible
Paine said about
moral
slavery?
good.
It wasn't on its way out when they were all dead.
Hold on a second. How many states abolished slavery by the time the
you know what
Constitution
Thomas
was? How
Paine
many
said
states
about
abolished slavery by 1787? 9 out of 13. So a majority of states had already abolished it. Northwest
Why'd
Territories.
they structure
Didn't some states start bringing slavery back? Wasn't that kind of a problem? I don't know. Fuck. American history. How many states had slavery in the Civil War? When the Civil War started? Why is he saying that 9 out of 13 states had abolished slavery? But then at the start of the Civil War, there were 15 slave states. How does that work? Is it because between 1776 or whatever and afterwards, more states added to the Union? Okay. Did some states not go back to slavery, or was it that they were trying to end slavery and it wasn't happening and some states were refusing? The Mason-Dixon, thank you so much. Wow. More were created. More slave states were created, or? I'm just trying to think, like, I know that I've heard people have issues with that 9 out of 13 thing, because between that and the Civil War, was it just other states were refusing, or? Oh God, I need more viewers, because then I can just have someone come in and explain it to me in like 3 seconds. But oh God, whatever. Otherwise, we'd have to read this. Ugh! New territory. Okay. Oh God, look at that. We put the states back like that. Whoa, ho, ho. Damn. You think the Spanish can? Must be pretty shit to be Spanish. You lose all that. The colony of Louisiana. Wow.
the Constitution in such a way to give slave states more representation?
Happy to walk through it. Northwest Territories, first act of Congress, free or slave area? Free. Unanimous. Article 6 of the Northwest Territory. First state to abolish slavery. Vermont, 1777. Inspired by the writings of the Declaration. First anti-slavery convention. 1775. Chaired by Benjamin Franklin.
When is slavery?
George Washington said it's not a question of if.
When did slavery end in the United States? Is she going to say never because of the prison system?
It's a matter of when we abolish slavery. Thomas Jefferson admonished King George in the original draft of the Declaration of Independence.
That means very
saying
little.
that slavery is a great evil that we blame King George for.
He was also very
Thomas
angry.
Jefferson abolished the slave trade into America. Hold on a second.
For telling them they couldn't keep killing indigenous folks.
Thomas Jefferson said very clearly in the Virginia House of Commons in 1790 that we must abolish slavery. He abolished the importation of new slaves as one of his first acts of president in March of 1807. The founding fathers fought tooth and nail to abolish slavery. So you have a misrepresentation, an intentional polemical argument to try to misrepresent the great heroes of the founding fathers.
When they banned the importation of slaves, what happened?
What ended up happening was the slave trade went down, Eli Whitney creates the cotton gin, and a whole new debate of slavery gets reignited.
No, see, that's actually not true, right? The reality is,
What
do you
ended
know
up
what
happening?
happened? The slave trade, I guess, went down, if you're talking about international trade. The United States set up literal farms where human beings were bred. Human beings were bred and forced to get
Slavery was
pregnant
going
to
down
have
dramatically
children
in the
to
18
expand
teens.
slavery.
18 teens, it's going down. 9 out of 13 states
Wait,
that
you were
abolished
just talking
it.
about the 1770s, and now all of a sudden we're at the 18
Hey, guess
teens.
what?
We just
Guess
jumped
what?
50
Guess what?
years.
Thomas Jefferson was president in 1807. So you got to get your years right, okay, before we talk about this. So he was sworn in March of 1807. He was governor
Oh
of
no, the 1776 commission guy is. Oh no, he's armed and dangerous for the. I swear to God, I know there's some fucking issue with what Charlie Kirk is saying. I just can't remember what it was.
Virginia in 1790, wrote the Declaration in
So
1776.
when did slavery end in the United States?
Great question. It began to end in 1777, a process of decoupling from an ancestral evil, where we have more people in the world right now that are slaves today than back then.
That was a bit of a pivot.
The process began 1820s. The debate reignites because of John C. Calhoun, the creation of the cotton gin. We fight a war over it. We win the war, and slavery is abolished. That's a pretty awesome track record for a country that inherited an evil that every other country prior to it had. It was the West that got rid of slavery. It was William Wilberforce. It was John Edwards. It was George Whitefield. It's easy to kind of do your thing like, well, it's terrible, it's bad. Yes, it's easy to call
Slavery
balls and
did
strikes on a society.
There were actually like abolition of slavery happened a lot in a lot of different parts of the world and at different times. I think way before like wasn't slavery abolished by like in China at one point, way before even the Americas. I feel like it was. Haiti was first. Yeah. I know that Haiti was earlier. Yeah. Let me see. There are also some parts here as well. Petitions against slavery, banned in Emirati. Interesting. In Georgia. Interesting. I didn't know that. In Russia, Muslim slave trade was banned in 1649. Lithuania, 1588. Serfs emancipated. I mean, England was still doing slavery, though, right? What was the Chinese one? Was it the Ming Dynasty? They had debt servitude afterwards. Yeah, I knew this. I knew that abolition of slavery had happened in a lot of places, but then come back and then gone and then come back. Yeah. The Ming Dynasty abolished it in I think this is what I remember, 1368. Most forms.
You didn't create. It's easy to try to lecture the rest of the country. Be like, you know, these people are so terrible for something you didn't toil for or sacrifice for. Have an ounce of gratitude
they were
for
slave
what
owners.
these people
they were
created
slave owners.
and the country you get to live in.
It was the slaves that were toiling. They were slave owners. Also, by the way, slavery
question.
was never abolished. We literally have it in the Constitution to this very day.
Oh, I'm sorry, what's the 13th?
Oh, the prison system. Oh, no. We also have, apparently here in 9 to 12 AD, the only emperor of the Jin dynasty abolished slavery, and then it came back after, like 10 years later, because he was killed by an angry mob. I don't know. That's it. That's really interesting. I didn't know that.
Amendment.
Thank you, gentlemen. Ben?
I think if you're talking Central Europe or like Lithuania, wouldn't that be Muslim slaves? Would it be? Oh.
We'll hear your closing remarks now.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Fundamentally, at the end of the day, the state can work to suppress the interests of capitalists, or it can work to suppress the interests of the workers. In the United States of America today, it is clearly suppressing the interests of workers. Just look at the difficulty that people have in terms of forming labor unions, demanding higher wages, even getting access to basic health care that even other capitalist countries have. right? Then you have a lot of countries that have been the victims of colonialism, that have states that serve the interests of the working class people, and while they have a very difficult starting point, the reality is they are surpassing the
Very
United
difficult.
States now in a time frame that is...
The funniest thing about this conversation is how their rhetoric and how their vocabulary will change so much depending on who's committing the atrocities. Like, apparently the American prison system right now is is like a modern day slave economy, but the beginnings of 20th century socialism there were some difficulties, and for Charlie Kirk it's like North Korea is a festering hellhole and the brutality of the gulags and everything, and then like, well, how did George Washington get his teeth? Listen, he was a mixed bag, okay? He ripped the teeth out of others of slaves and put them in his own mouth. Yeah, he was a bit of a mixed bag, you know? That's just the fucking absolute insane hackery on both sides is really, really funny here.
rapidly outpacing the development that happened in the United States. So ultimately, the reality is we can choose for the government to serve the interests of the very rich few, or we can have a government that serves average working class folks.
So I just have one question. I'm sorry. Do you trust the government?
This government? No. But once again, we have to ask the nature of the state.
But then why would you want to make that government bigger?
No. It's not about making the government bigger. It's about changing the fundamental structure of the government so that it serves the interests of workers instead of the interests of capital. And in fact, this is one of the things that, like the fundamental dishonesties that I think come from people.
Which hack is better? I would be safer in Charlie Kirk's world, probably. Although that doesn't sound very nice either. How many atrocities did each of them deny? Charlie Kirk downplayed the racism of the Founding Fathers. I think he did downplay how slave-happy America was between the Declaration of Independence and the Civil War. I think that's probably true. I think Charlie Kirk downplayed the indigenous genocides in the Americas, but this fucking moron upscaled them. So what else do we got? Holodomor, Great Leap Forward, Russian Civil War, famines. Listen. There we go. There's your okay.
People like you point to a capitalist government, say, look, it's not working for workers. We should have less government and give capitalists more power.
That's
But
my
the
answer to your
reality
question.
is, right, and this is the fundamental reality, that it's the nature of the government that's the problem. You're unwilling to admit the very fact that our government is fundamentally serving the interests of capital as opposed to serving the interests of the workers. And that if we were to flip the system on its head, then it would work a lot better.
At its best, it's the opposite. It serves the function of the liberty of individuals, the pursuit of virtue. Yeah, I mean, look, in closing, human beings aren't naturally good. We're actually naturally awful to each other. And human history shows that. We have the same problems over and over again, and the government needs to be strong but small. And the Founding Fathers built that beautiful government that people like you are trying to destroy in a country that you refuse to leave. Here's how you know you live in a great country, that even those who say they hate it refuse to leave. Every person in China that would be given a chance to go out, almost every...
That is actually, that's one good thing Charlie Kirk said. That's quite funny. That is actually so fucking true. Like, all these American flag burners, they won't even go to Europe, those people. Like, really? Realistically.
Every person would leave almost instantaneously.
Why don't they?
Because they're not allowed to.
Really? People
Wow.
move to
Same
the
in
United
Cuba.
States from China all the time.
Those that are allowed.
What do
You
mean
have to be pretty well off to come to go to the United States from China, no? Yeah.
those that are allowed?
In Venezuela,
You're
in
just
Cuba,
banking
in
on
Iran,
people not knowing about
there
any
are
of these
millions
countries.
of people that would do anything to leave these disastrous experiments. And I have met far too many victims of communism to take any of your arguments seriously. People that have the
You mean the
the
people
wounds to show it.
You mean-
the pastors that were in jail for decades in the Soviet
Oh no, this is the chatter from the past. There is no way Benny is saying the largest genocide was Native Americans, right? Do you believe there was 200 million people on the continent in the 15th? I think what white tankies like to do is that they love to... there aren't enough brown and black people's graves in the world for them to dance and piss on, so they just need to invent a few more in their heads. That is a very standard rule for white tankies. Yeah.
Soviet Union for doing
Like
nothing
the-
wrong.
That's what they were like when they were talking about the Queen's death. That's what they're like talking about the Iraq War. That's what they're like talking about fucking the Native American genocide. Apparently, yeah, they just the real numbers of brown and black people's graves is just not enough for them. They need more.
plantation owners that had their plantations
The
stolen by
people like
Fidel
Alexander
Castro.
Solzhenitsyn that wrote about it endlessly. The Cubans in Miami that had to build life rafts
Oh,
to
not
save
the
their
Cubans,
own
oh,
lives
no.
because of the oppressive Castro
The
regime.
fascist
The people
Cubans.
from Venezuela and Cuba and Argentina. I'm going to trust them a lot more than a smug, sanctimonious person with a super bizarre laugh that read a couple things online that sound good. Thank
Okay,
you.
buddy.
Charlie, thank you.
I feel like Charlie can probably keep the smug comment to himself. Isn't it? You know what? I've said this before, right? Smugness is such a weird trait because everyone loves smugness until the moment it's someone that they don't agree with. Smugness doesn't actually exist unless it's coming from someone who you disagree with because people just don't seem to notice it otherwise. I think Charlie Kirk genuinely doesn't believe he was smug in that debate. Yeah. Wacky shit. I was really hoping for a Gusanos there when Kirk mentioned Florida. Oh well. President Sundays. Wow. Obviously, I'm not talking in absolute terms, you asshole. Anyway. Sunday is quite smug, though, yes. But he's also quite funny. This is a really funny introduction to the Discord, I thought. Look at this. Hi, mid-20s homebuddy here. I'm a fan of Vosh's values and rhetoric, Destiny's policies and empathy, Lonerbox's essays and bridge building, Keffel's tanky dunking, and writing stupidly long essays and YouTube comment arguments. Practically a liberal, but with an eye on the horizon for minimizing all hierarchies and believe inequality is inherently corrosive. I wonder where you got this practically a liberal but from. I hope that wasn't from me. It's so cute. This is something Lex Fridman would type. It totally is. Oh, man. I like it. Because, like, the average, YouTube viewers are so different. At the end of the day, it's weird when people like to, because there's this tendency to kind of, like, monotonize, like, homogenize audiences in your head, like the tanky audiences, the fucking breadtube audiences, the fucking DGGers, the VG. Like, actually, there's so much variety in these audiences. I think there was like someone who said once that a lot of the like the Vosh and Destiny subreddits it's like 90% the same people in both subreddits. Or yeah, I don't know if that's actually that number, but there's a lot of overlap. It kind of is, yeah. Like, it's not really surprising. Or that it makes me feel funny that there are just like these leftists who, even across the tanky and social democrat sphere, there are people who like watch ContraPoints videos and then they'll watch like maybe Destiny or Vosh, and then they'll watch like fucking Hakeem, and then they'll watch me, and they like all of us. I'm like, what are you doing with yours? Yeah. Wacky stuff. Anyway, apparently Keffels and Benny are fighting now. It's not LGG, Maruzzi. We can't be called that. That's cringe. We have to be LBGG, like the LBGG community. It sounds like queer, but not really. Yeah. We can't be the LGG. That's horrible. Way too much E sound. LGG just sounds so bad. It's either someone with a stutter who's trying to sell computer monitors to you, or it's just like someone calling me shit, like LGG. The LBGTQ plus community. Yeah, true. All right, hang on. The Laliban. I think Box Bulla is good. It's so shoehorned, but I like it. But Keffels has gone full tanky arc. I'll continue to purity test leftists who defend genocidal authoritarian regimes and take blood money from fascists. But we tankies believe American is a genocidal authoritarian regime and a consistently fascistic one in all honesty. Whenever people hate on tankies, they forget this is the worldview we hold. It's a decision between the lesser of two different fascisms. Not fascism versus democracy. Oh my god. That's amazing. This person is so white you can't even look at them like directly, but okay. Oh, these are all a Windex. That's what I said.
You understand, I have to be honest. You are such an unbelievable fool to believe that China That was amazing. That's so good. Oh, she's done a video about how Marxist Leninism is dangerous. I was in a cult. Whoa. Whoa! Brianna Wu sharing. The gulags were based. Kulaks, counter-revolutionaries, opportunists, Nazi collaboration, Western spies. I feel like I just need to look into all of these because when I looked into the Tatar one and people were saying that the Tatars were deported because they were Nazi collaborators, you look at the stats and it's like there are about 250 or 200,000 of them. About 20-odd thousand at most were Nazi collaborators or sympathizers, but the majority of them were evacuated from Crimea and taken westwards when the Wehrmacht were being kicked out, when they were fleeing. And then Stalin just takes the ones who are left after most of the Nazi collaborators have gone and then just deports the entire group. It's like, I guess it's the case with all of it though, right? With the Uyghurs, like, oh, there's a terrorist group. That's why we need to take all the Uyghurs and put them into fucking camps and re-educate them. Like, or like, it's just funny when you take a group that you say is a political category, like a terrorist or a Nazi collaborator and all that, but you just end up targeting the ethnic group. It's like, that's like the Soviet formula. It's kind of brilliant, but yeah. How the fuck it works. Shit.